Hello, wizards and muggles. Welcome to Hogwarts. Before our magical adventure, click subscribe to support us. Don't worry, we won't turn anyone into a toad unless you don't subscribe. Your subscription is very important to us. And don't forget to leave your your comment below. Your opinion is as important as a lesson with Dumbledore. Now, let's get on with the story. The summer heat pressed against my skin as I lay on the parched grass of the Dursleys' backyard, trying to catch any hint of news from the slightly open window above. Uncle Vernon's voice droned on about drills, but I wasn't interested in that. I needed to know what was happening in the wizarding world. A sudden flutter of wings made me sit up. An owl, its feathers a mottled brown, swooped down and dropped a small package beside me before disappearing into the evening sky. My heart raced as I snatched it up, glancing nervously at the house. If the Dursleys caught me with anything freakish, I'd be in for it. I retreated to the small copse of trees at the edge of the yard, tearing open the package with trembling fingers. Inside was a book, its leather cover cracked and faded with age. A slip of parchment fluttered out. The truth lies within. Trust no one. A friend. My brow furrowed as I turned the book over in my hands. Who could have sent this? And why? As I opened it, the musty smell of ancient pages filled my nostrils. My eyes widened as I read the title page, The True History of Hogwarts, The Forgotten Founder. "Boy, where are you?" Aunt Petunia's shrill voice cut through the air. I quickly shoved the book into my oversized hand-me-down shirt. "Coming, Aunt Petunia!" I called back, my mind reeling from what I'd just discovered. That night, after a meager dinner and the usual litany of chores, I finally had a moment to myself. Locking myself in the tiny bedroom that had once been Dudley's second room for his broken toys, I pulled out the mysterious book and began to read by the dim light of a flickering desk lamp. As I delved deeper into its pages, my confusion grew. The book spoke of not 4, but 5 founders of Hogwarts. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin were all there, but among them was a name I'd never heard before. Eleanor Evershaw. This can't be right, I muttered to myself, flipping through the pages. We've never learned about a 5th founder in history of magic. A soft tap at my window made me jump. I looked up to see Hedwig perched on the sill, a letter tied to her leg. Grateful for the distraction, I let her in and untied the message. It was from Ron. "Harry, Dad's been acting weird lately. Keeps having hushed conversations with Mum. Something's going on at the ministry, but no one will tell us anything. Have you heard from Hermione? She's gone quiet too." "Ron," I frowned, glancing back at the book. Could this all be connected? The secrecy, the hidden founder, the strange atmosphere Ron was describing. As the days passed, I found myself consumed by the book. I read it cover to cover, then started again, looking for clues I might have missed. The more I learned about Eleanor Evershaw, the more questions I had. Why had she been erased from history? What had she done to deserve such treatment? Finally, September 1st arrived. As I pushed my trolley through King's Cross Station, my mind was elsewhere, still puzzling over the mysteries of the book safely tucked away in my trunk. "Harry, over here." Hermione's voice cut through my reverie. I looked up to see her waving frantically, Ron by her side. As I approached, I noticed the worried looks on their faces. "What's wrong?" I asked, lowering my voice as we made our way to platform 934. Hermione bit her lip, glancing around before speaking. "There's something strange going on, Harry. I've been doing some research over the summer and, well, it's like parts of magical history are just missing." Ron nodded grimly. "Dad's been working late every night. Says it's just extra paperwork, but I don't buy it." I felt a chill run down my spine. "I think I might know why," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But not here, on the train." We found an empty compartment and settled in. As the Hogwarts Express pulled out of the station, I pulled the ancient book from my bag. "This arrived a few weeks ago," I explained, showing it to them. "It talks about a 5th founder of Hogwarts." Hermione's eyes widened as she took the book, her fingers tracing the faded title. "This is incredible, Harry. Where did you get this?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It just arrived." Ron leaned in, his freckled face scrunched in confusion. "A 5th founder? That's mental. We'd know if there was another founder, wouldn't we?" "Not if someone wanted to keep it a secret," Hermione mused, already flipping through the pages. As we discussed the implications of what we'd discovered, the compartment door suddenly slid open. We all jumped, Hermione quickly hiding the book behind her back. Draco Malfoy stood in the doorway, his pale, pointed face twisted into its usual sneer. "Well, well, what are you three whispering about?" I felt my fists clench. "None of your business, Malfoy." His eyes narrowed, flicking between the three of us. "I'd be careful if I were you, Potter. There are some secrets better left buried." With that cryptic warning, he turned and left, sliding the door shut behind him. We sat in stunned silence for a moment before Ron spoke up. "What was that about?" I shook my head, a feeling of unease settling in my stomach. "I don't know, but I don't like it." As we approached Hogwarts, the familiar excitement of returning to school was tempered by the weight of our discovery. The castle loomed ahead, its many towers silhouetted against the darkening sky. I couldn't help but see it differently now, wondering what other secrets its ancient walls might be hiding. The welcome feast was as grand as ever, but I found it hard to focus on Dumbledore's speech. I kept glancing around the Great Hall, noting details I'd never paid attention to before. Were there clues hidden in plain sight? As Dumbledore spoke about the school's long and noble history, I noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Worry? It was gone so quickly I couldn't be sure. That night, as I lay in my four-poster bed in Gryffindor Tower, sleep eluded me. The book lay hidden in my trunk, its secrets burning in my mind. Who was Eleanor Evershaw? Why had she been erased from history? And most importantly, why now? Why had this information found its way to me? As I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. This year at Hogwarts was going to be unlike any other. Little did I know just how right I was, or how dangerous the path ahead would be. The first week back at Hogwarts passed in a blur of classes, whispered conversations, and furtive glances at the mysterious book. Every spare moment was spent poring over its pages, searching for clues about Eleanor Evershaw. But the more we learned, the more questions we had. "We need to get into the restricted section," Hermione whispered one evening in the common room. "There might be more information there." Ron looked uneasy. "But how?" "We'd need a note from a teacher." I glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "We still have the invisibility cloak. We could go tonight." Hermione bit her lip, clearly torn between her thirst for knowledge and her respect for rules. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but we have to be careful." That night, we huddled under the cloak, our hearts pounding as we made our way to the library. The castle seemed different in the dark, shadows dancing on the walls, portraits whispering as we passed. "Lumos," I muttered as we entered the restricted section. The dim light from my wand cast an eerie glow over the ancient tomes. We split up, each taking a section. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of pages. After what felt like hours, Hermione's excited whisper cut through the darkness. "I found something." Ron and I hurried over. Hermione was holding a massive book, its pages yellowed with age. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a passage. I leaned in, squinting at the faded text. "And thus, the great schism was healed. The five united once more under the banner of Hogwarts." "Five?" Ron echoed. "So it's true. There really was a fifth founder." Suddenly, a noise from outside the library made us freeze, footsteps getting closer. "Quick, under the cloak!" I hissed. We barely managed to cover ourselves before the library door creaked open. Filch shuffled in, Mrs. Norris at his heels. "Sniff around, my sweet," he wheezed. "They're in here somewhere, I know it." We held our breath, pressed against the bookshelves. Mrs. Norris came dangerously close, her lamp-like eyes seeming to stare right at us. After what felt like an eternity, Filch grumbled and left, his cat following reluctantly. Once we were sure they were gone, we let out a collective sigh of relief. "That was too close," Ron muttered. "Wait," Hermione said, reaching for the book again. "Look at this. The pages. They're missing." She was right. Where there should have been more information about the five founders, there were only ragged edges, as if the pages had been torn out. "Someone doesn't want this information found," I said grimly. The next day, still shaken from our close call, I headed to Quidditch practice. As I mounted my firebolt, I tried to focus on the game, but my mind kept wandering back to Eleanor Evershaw and the missing pages. "Watch out, Harry!" Angelina's shout snapped me back to reality, just in time to dodge a bludger. "Sorry," I called back, shaking my head to clear it. As I circled the pitch, something caught my eye. There, carved into one of the goalposts, was a symbol I recognized from the ancient book, a five-pointed star with a wand at its center. I flew closer, my heart racing. How long had this been here? Had anyone else noticed? "Potter, what are you doing?" Wood's voice boomed across the pitch. I reluctantly flew back to the team, the symbol burning in my mind. After practice, I cornered Ron and Hermione. "You won't believe what I saw," I began, but I was cut off by the drawling voice of Draco Malfoy. "Well, if it isn't the Golden Trio, planning your next adventure, Potter." I turned, my hand instinctively moving towards my wand. "What do you want, Malfoy?" Draco's eyes narrowed. "I told you to be careful, didn't I? Some secrets are dangerous. You might not like what you find." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving us staring after him in confusion. "What was that about?" Ron asked. I shook my head. "I don't know, but I don't like it. Come on, we need to talk somewhere private." We found an empty classroom and I told them about the symbol on the goalpost. "It can't be a coincidence," Hermione mused. "But why would it be there, of all places?" Our discussion was interrupted by a knock at the door. We fell silent, exchanging worried glances. The door creaked open, revealing Professor Snape. "And what," he said silkily, "are 3 Gryffindors doing in an empty classroom after hours?" "We were just studying, Professor," Hermione stammered. Snape's black eyes bored into us. "Indeed. And what, pray tell, were you studying so intently?" "Potions, sir," I lied quickly. "We were discussing the properties of forgotten ingredients." Something flickered in Snape's eyes. "Forgotten ingredients, Potter. An interesting choice of topic. I suggest you be careful when delving into forgotten things. They are often forgotten for a reason." With that cryptic remark, he swept out of the room, his black robes billowing behind him. "Okay, that was weird," Ron said once we were sure Snape was gone. I nodded, a chill running down my spine. It's like he knew what we were really talking about. That night, I tossed and turned in my bed, unable to sleep. The events of the day swirled in my mind. The missing pages, the symbol on the goalpost, Malfoy's warning, Snape's strange behavior. It all had to be connected, but how? As I finally drifted off, I found myself in a vivid dream. I was standing in the Great Hall, but it was different, older, rougher. 5 figures stood before me, their faces obscured. 4 I recognized from paintings and statues around the castle, the founders. But the 5th... "Who are you?" I called out. The 5th figure stepped forward, a woman with long dark hair and piercing green eyes. "I am the one they tried to erase," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "But the truth cannot remain hidden forever." "Eleanor Evershaw," I breathed. She nodded, a sad smile on her face. "Find the truth, Harry Potter. It lies beneath the lion's paw." I woke with a start, the dream still vivid in my mind. Grabbing my glasses, I fumbled for a piece of parchment and quill, scribbling down what I remembered before it could fade. As the first rays of dawn crept through the dormitory windows, I stared at the words I'd written. Beneath the lion's paw. What did it mean? And more importantly, what would we find when we solved this riddle? One thing was certain, the mystery of the 5th founder was far from over, and something told me that unraveling it would change everything I thought I knew about Hogwarts, and maybe even about myself. The next morning, I could barely focus on my breakfast. The dream still lingered in my mind, the words, "beneath the lion's paw," echoing like a mantra. "Harry, you've been stirring that porridge for 10 minutes, Hermione said, eyeing me with concern. "What's wrong?" I glanced around the Great Hall before leaning in. "I had a dream last night. About... her." Ron nearly choked on his pumpkin juice. "Eleanor Evershaw," he whispered. I nodded, then quickly recounted the dream. Hermione's brow furrowed in concentration. "Beneath the lion's paw. It must be a clue," she mused. But what could it mean? Our hushed discussion was interrupted by the arrival of the morning post. As owls swooped overhead, dropping letters and packages to students, I noticed Professor McGonagall watching us intently from the staff table. Her gaze made me uneasy. "We should be careful," I muttered. "I think the teachers are getting suspicious." As we headed to History of Magic, I made a decision. "I'm going to ask Binns about the 5th founder," I told Ron and Hermione. "Are you mental?" Ron hissed. "He'll know we're up to something." But I was determined. As Professor Binns droned on about goblin rebellions, I raised my hand. The ghostly professor looked surprised. It wasn't often that students participated in his class. Yes, Mr. Potter? I took a deep breath. Professor, I was wondering if you could tell us about the fifth founder of Hogwarts. The effect was immediate. Binns's translucent form seemed to flicker, and for a moment I thought he might disappear entirely. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Potter, Binns stammered, his usual monotone replaced by a tremor. There were only 4 founders of Hogwarts, as any first year knows. But, sir, I pressed, ignoring Hermione's warning look, I've read about a witch named Eleanor Evershaw who— Enough! Binns shouted, startling the entire class. This is not an appropriate topic for discussion. Class dismissed. With that, he vanished through the blackboard, leaving behind a room full of confused students and an oppressive silence. Well, Ron said as we gathered our things, that wasn't suspicious at all. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and furtive glances. It seemed that news of my question in history of magic had spread quickly. Even the portraits seemed to be watching us more closely. That weekend, we decided to visit Hogsmeade, hoping the change of scenery might help clear our heads. As we settled into a corner booth at the Three Broomsticks, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Maybe we should take a break from all this, Hermione suggested, sipping her butterbeer. We're starting to get paranoid. But before Ron or I could respond, a hushed conversation from the next booth caught my attention. Can't believe they're talking about the Great Erasure again, a gruff voice muttered. Shh, another voice hissed. You know we're not supposed to discuss that in public. I turned my head slightly, trying to catch more of their conversation without being obvious. But after all this time, why now? The first voice asked. I don't know, but the Ministry's in an uproar. If the truth gets out. Suddenly they fell silent. I glanced over to see 2 wizards staring at me, their faces pale. Without a word, they stood and hurried out of the pub. Harry! Hermione's voice snapped me back to our table. What is it? I quickly relayed what I'd overheard. Ron's eyes widened. The Great Erasure? That sounds ominous. And the Ministry's involved, I added grimly. This is bigger than we thought. As we made our way back to the castle, a cold wind picked up, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. The usually cheerful trip back from Hogsmeade felt tense and uncomfortable. Back in the common room, we huddled in a corner, speaking in hushed tones. We need to find out more about this Great Erasure, Hermione said, her quill poised over a piece of parchment, and what the Ministry has to do with it. But how? Ron asked. It's not like we can just walk into the Ministry and start asking questions. I was about to respond when a school owl swooped in through an open window, dropping a small note in my lap before flying off again. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it. Seek the chamber where secrets lie twice, I read aloud. Hermione gasped. The Chamber of Secrets? But twice? A chill ran down my spine as realization dawned. There must be another secret chamber within the Chamber of Secrets itself. Ron groaned. Brilliant, because our last visit there was so much fun. Despite Ron's reservations, we knew we had to investigate. That night, under the cover of my invisibility cloak, we made our way to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Who's there? Myrtle wailed as we entered. Come to tease me again? It's just us, Myrtle, I said, pulling off the cloak. We need to get into the chamber again. Myrtle's ghostly face lit up with curiosity. Ooh, more secrets! How exciting! I approached the sink with the snake engraving, took a deep breath, and hissed, Open, in Parseltongue. The sink began to move, revealing the dark, slimy pipe that led to the chamber. I can't believe we're doing this again, Ron muttered as we slid down into the darkness. The chamber was just as damp and eerie as I remembered. The skeleton of the basilisk still lay where it had fallen years ago, but this time we weren't here for the main chamber. Look for anything unusual, I said, lighting my wand. A hidden door, a strange symbol, anything. We searched for what felt like hours, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional drip of water. Just as I was about to suggest we give up, Hermione called out, Over here! I've found something! Ron and I rushed over. Hermione was pointing at a small carving on one of the pillars, the same 5-pointed star with a wand that I'd seen on the Quidditch goalpost. It's got to be connected, I said, reaching out to touch the symbol. As my fingers brushed the cold stone, there was a grinding noise. The pillar began to rotate, revealing a hidden passage. Blimey, Ron whispered. What do you reckon is down there? I took a deep breath, tightening my grip on my wand. Only one way to find out. As we stepped into the dark passage, the air grew colder. The walls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the wand light. "These are ancient runes," Hermione breathed, her eyes wide. "But some of them, I've never seen anything like them before." Suddenly, a loud, grinding noise echoed behind us. We turned to see the entrance closing. "No!" I shouted, lunging for the opening. But it was too late. The passage sealed itself, leaving us trapped in the darkness. "Well," Ron said, his voice shaking slightly, "I guess there's no turning back now." As we pressed on, the passage widening into a small circular room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the verge of uncovering something huge. Something that would change everything we thought we knew about Hogwarts, about magic itself. And as the room began to glow with an otherworldly light, revealing ancient artifacts and scrolls, I realized that our journey into the heart of Hogwarts' greatest secret was only just beginning. The eerie glow of the hidden chamber cast long shadows across the ancient artifacts. My heart raced as I took in the scene before us. Shelves lined with dusty tomes, strange magical instruments, and at the center, a pedestal holding what looked like a silver chalice. "This is incredible," Hermione breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Some of these books, I've never even heard of them before." Ron, however, looked uneasy. "Yeah, great. Now how do we get out of here?" I approached the pedestal, drawn to the chalice. As I reached out to touch it, a voice behind us made us all jump. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Harry Potter." We whirled around, wands at the ready. There, floating serenely in the air, was the silvery form of the Grey Lady, the ghost of Ravenclaw Tower. How did you get in here?" I stammered. The Grey Lady smiled sadly. "I've known about this place for centuries. It was a sanctuary of sorts." "For Eleanor Evershaw?" Hermione asked eagerly. The ghost's expression darkened. "You know not what forces you're meddling with. This knowledge was hidden for a reason." "But why?" I pressed. "What was so dangerous about a fifth founder?" Before the Grey Lady could answer, a rumbling sound filled the chamber. The wall behind her began to shift, revealing a hidden exit. "You must go," she said urgently. "He's coming. Remember, not all is as it seems. Trust in the unity of the five." With that cryptic warning, she vanished, leaving us alone in the rapidly destabilizing chamber. "Come on!" I shouted, grabbing Hermione's arm as she tried to snatch a book from a nearby shelf. We raced through the opening, emerging into a familiar corridor just as the passage sealed behind us. "Bloody hell!" Ron gasped, leaning against the wall. "That was close." But who was coming? Hermione wondered. And what did she mean about the unity of the five? I shook my head, my mind reeling. "I don't know, but we need to be careful. Let's get back to the common room." The next few days were a whirlwind of classes, secret research, and growing paranoia. Every whispered conversation in the hallways, every stern look from a professor seemed to hide some deeper meaning. During a DA meeting, I found myself incorporating some of the spells I'd learned from the ancient book, much to everyone's amazement. "Blimey, Harry!" Neville exclaimed after successfully deflecting a particularly tricky curse. "Where'd you learn that one?" I hesitated, catching Ron and Hermione's warning glances. "Oh, just some extra reading." After the meeting, Luna approached me, her protuberant eyes even wider than usual. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she said in her dreamy voice. "The Chamber of the Forgotten One." I felt my blood run cold. "What do you mean, Luna?" She smiled serenely. "Oh, Daddy's been writing about it for years. The lost founder, erased from history. He says her magic was too powerful, too dangerous." Before I could respond, Draco Malfoy's drawling voice cut through the air. Well, if it isn't Potty and Looney sharing secrets." I turned to face him, my hand instinctively moving to my wand. "What do you want, Malfoy?" Draco's pale face was uncharacteristically serious. "A word, Potter. Alone." Curiosity overrode my better judgment, and I followed him to a secluded alcove, keeping my hand on my wand. "I know what you're looking into," Draco said in a low voice. "The fifth founder, Eleanor Evershaw." I tried to keep my face neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." Draco's eyes flashed. "Don't play dumb, Potter. My family, we have knowledge of these things. And I'm warning you, stop digging. Some secrets are buried for a reason." "Is that a threat?" I challenged. "A warning," Draco corrected. You're meddling with forces beyond your understanding. Dark forces. With that, he turned and strode away, leaving me more confused than ever. That evening, as I recounted my conversations with Luna and Draco to Ron and Hermione in the common room, Professor McGonagall's voice rang out. "Mr. Potter, a word, if you please." Exchanging nervous glances with my friends, I followed McGonagall to her office. The walk seemed to take an eternity, my mind racing with possible scenarios. Once inside, McGonagall fixed me with a stern gaze. "Mr. Potter, it has come to my attention that you've been asking some unusual questions lately." I swallowed hard. "I'm not sure what you mean, Professor." Her eyes narrowed. "About the founders, Mr. Potter. About Hogwarts history." "I'm just curious about the school's past," I said, trying to sound casual. McGonagall sighed, her expression softening slightly. "Curiosity is a valuable trait, Potter, but it can also be dangerous. There are some things in this castle's history that are best left undisturbed." As I left her office, her words echoed in my head. It seemed that everywhere we turned, we were being warned away from our investigation. But why? What could be so terrible about the truth? That night, I tossed and turned in my bed, unable to sleep. When I finally drifted off, I found myself in another vivid dream. I was standing in the Great Hall, but it was different, older, grander. 5 figures stood before me, their faces obscured by shadow. 4 I recognized from countless paintings and statues, but the 5th... "Who are you?" I called out. The 5th figure stepped forward, resolving into the form of a woman with long dark hair and piercing green eyes. "I am the one they fear," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "The one they tried to erase." "Eleanora Evershaw," I breathed. She nodded, a sad smile on her face. "You're close to the truth, Harry Potter, but beware. Not all who offer help are allies, and not all who warn you away are enemies." "I don't understand," I said, frustration building. "What's the truth? Why were you erased from history?" But Eleanora was already fading. "Find the Founder's chalice," her voice whispered as the dream dissolved around me. "Only then will all be revealed." I awoke with a start, my scar prickling uncomfortably. The dream felt more real than ever, and I knew sleep wouldn't come again tonight. Quietly, so as not to wake my dormmates, I slipped out of bed and made my way down to the common room. To my surprise, I found Hermione there, surrounded by books. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked, settling into an armchair beside her. She shook her head, her bushy hair even wilder than usual. "I've been thinking about what the Grey Lady said, about the unity of the 5. Look at this." She pushed a book towards me. On the page was an illustration of a familiar symbol, the 5-pointed star with a wand at its center. "It's an ancient magical symbol," Hermione explained, her voice hushed with excitement. "It represents the unity of the 5 elemental magics. But here's the thing, modern magical theory only recognizes 4 elements." I felt a chill run down my spine. "So, the 5th point could represent Eleanora's magic," Hermione finished. "A type of magic so powerful, so dangerous, that it was erased from history along with her." As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, I realized that we were standing on the precipice of a discovery that could shake the very foundations of the magical world. And somewhere out there, the Founder's chalice held the key to it all. "We need to find that chalice," I said, determination filling me. "Whatever it takes." Hermione nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Whatever it takes," she echoed. As we sat there, the weight of our quest settling over us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Somewhere in the castle, forces were aligning, both for and against us, and the race to uncover Hogwarts' greatest secret was only just beginning. The next few days passed in a blur of classes, secret research, and growing tension. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, every whispered conversation a possible clue. The weight of our discovery pressed down on us, making even the most mundane tasks feel fraught with significance. It was during Charms class that things took an unexpected turn. Professor Flitwick was demonstrating a particularly tricky bit of wand work when the words from the ancient book suddenly flashed through my mind. Without thinking, I flicked my wand and muttered, "Revelio Arcanum." A burst of silver light erupted from my wand, enveloping the classroom in a shimmering haze. For a moment, hidden symbols and runes became visible on the walls and ceiling, pulsing with an otherworldly glow before fading away. The class fell silent, all eyes turning to me in shock. Professor Flitwick's squeaky voice broke the silence. "Mr. Potter, where did you learn that spell?" I felt my face grow hot as I stammered, I'm not sure, Professor. I must have read it somewhere. Flitwick's eyes narrowed, a mixture of suspicion and concern crossing his face. That, Mr. Potter, is no ordinary spell. It's an ancient form of magic, one that's not been taught at Hogwarts for a very long time. As the class buzzed with excited whispers, I caught Hermione's worried glance. We both knew that our secret investigation was becoming harder to hide. After class, Ron, Hermione, and I huddled in a secluded corner of the courtyard. Harry, you've got to be more careful, Hermione hissed. Using magic from that book in class. You might as well announce to the whole school what we're up to. I know, I said, running a hand through my hair in frustration. It just came to me, like I'd known it all along. Ron looked thoughtful. You don't think... could this have something to do with your connection to you-know-who? The possibility sent a chill down my spine. I don't know, but we need to find out more about this magic, and fast. Hermione nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. I think I might have found something. That symbol we keep seeing. I've been researching it, and it's connected to an old magical tradition, one that predates even the founding of Hogwarts. Before she could elaborate, a dreamy voice interrupted us. Oh, are you talking about the pentagram of primal magic? We turned to see Luna Lovegood standing there, her radish earrings swinging gently in the breeze. The what? Ron asked, bewildered. Luna smiled serenely. The pentagram of primal magic. Daddy wrote about it once. It's supposed to represent the 5 fundamental forces of magic, but the Ministry doesn't want people to know about it, of course. I exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. Could Luna's often outlandish theories actually hold a grain of truth? Luna, I said carefully, what else do you know about this pentagram? Her eyes lit up. Oh, lots of things, but it's probably better if I show you. Meet me by the room of requirement tonight after curfew. As she skipped away, we were left to ponder this new development. We're not actually going to meet her, are we? Ron asked skeptically. Hermione bit her lip. I don't know. Luna's ideas are often unconventional, but at this point, we need all the help we can get. I nodded in agreement. We'll go, but we need to be careful. We're not the only ones interested in this secret. That night, as we crept through the darkened corridors under my invisibility cloak, the castle seemed alive with whispers and shadows. Every creaking floorboard, every flickering torch, set our nerves on edge. Luna was waiting for us outside the room of requirement, a dreamy smile on her face. Oh, good, you came. I was worried the Raxperts might have confused you. As we entered the room, I gasped. The walls were covered in shimmering animated tapestries depicting scenes of ancient magic. At the center of the room stood a glowing model of the pentagram symbol. Luna, this is incredible, Hermione breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Luna beamed. I asked the room to show us everything it knows about the pentagram of primal magic. Look here. She pointed to one of the tapestries, which showed 5 figures channeling elemental forces. 4 were familiar: fire, water, earth, and air. But the 5th... What's that one? Ron asked, squinting at the image. Ether, Luna replied. The 5th element, the source of the most powerful and dangerous magic. As we studied the tapestries, absorbing their ancient wisdom, a cold voice cut through our concentration. Well, what do we have here? We spun around to see Draco Malfoy standing in the doorway, his pale face twisted into a sneer. Malfoy, I growled, reaching for my wand. How did you find us? Draco's eyes glittered dangerously. You're not as subtle as you think, Potter. I've been watching you, and now I know what you're after. Tension crackled in the air as we faced off, wands drawn. But before either side could make a move, a new voice joined the fray. That's quite enough, all of you. Professor McGonagall stepped into the room, her face stern. Mr. Malfoy, return to your dormitory immediately. As for you 4, I think it's time we had a serious talk. As Draco slunk away, shooting us a triumphant smirk, McGonagall turned her piercing gaze on us. Professor, we can explain, Hermione began, but McGonagall held up a hand to silence her. Miss Granger, I'm well aware of what you've been up to, searching for information about Eleanora Evershaw and the 5th element of magic, aren't you? We exchanged shocked glances. How did she know? McGonagall's expression softened slightly, You're not the first students to stumble upon this mystery, but I warn you, this is dangerous knowledge. Knowledge that some would kill to keep hidden. But Professor, I argued, don't we have a right to know the truth about Hogwarts history? She sighed heavily. The truth, Mr. Potter, is not always as simple as we'd like it to be. Come with me. There's something you need to see. As we followed McGonagall through the silent corridors, my mind raced. What was she going to show us? And how much did she really know about Eleanor Evershaw? We descended deep into the castle, past even the dungeons, until we reached a heavy oak door bound with iron. McGonagall placed her hand on the door, murmuring an incantation, and it swung open with a groan. Inside was a small circular room. Its walls were lined with portraits, hundreds of them, all depicting the same woman, Eleanor Evershaw. Welcome, McGonagall said gravely, to the Chamber of Memories. The true history of Hogwarts is written on these walls, a history that has been hidden for centuries. As we stared in awe at the portraits, each showing Eleanor at a different point in her life, McGonagall continued. What you learn here may change everything you thought you knew about magic. Are you prepared for that? I looked at Ron, Hermione, and Luna, seeing my own determination reflected in their eyes. Then I turned back to McGonagall and nodded. We're ready, Professor. As McGonagall began to speak, unveiling secrets long buried, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The tapestry of Hogwarts' history was unraveling before us, revealing a pattern more complex and dangerous than we could have imagined. And somewhere out there, the Founder's Chalice still waited to be found, the key to unlocking the full power of the 5 elements. Our quest was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The Transfiguration classroom buzzed with excitement as Professor McGonagall introduced our next topic, Advanced Human Transfiguration. As she spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that this lesson was somehow connected to our ongoing investigation. Today we will be discussing the intricacies of altering one's physical appearance, McGonagall began, her eyes sweeping across the room. This is extremely advanced magic, far beyond your OWL level, but it's important you understand the theory. As she explained the complex wand movements, my mind wandered to the mysterious 5th Founder. Could advanced transfiguration explain how someone could be erased from history so completely? Mr. Potter, McGonagall's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the first step of the process? I stood up, acutely aware of everyone's eyes on me. As I raised my wand, a strange sensation washed over me. Without thinking, I performed a series of intricate movements I was sure I'd never learned. A collective gasp filled the room as my hair began to change color, shifting from black to a deep auburn. McGonagall's eyes widened in shock. Potter, where did you learn that? She demanded, her voice a mixture of awe and suspicion. I stared at my reflection in a nearby window, just as surprised as everyone else. I'm not sure, Professor. It just came to me. McGonagall's lips thinned into a tight line. See me after class, Potter. As the lesson continued, I could feel the weight of her gaze on me. What had just happened, and why did it feel so familiar? After class, I approached McGonagall's desk with trepidation. She looked at me over her spectacles, her expression unreadable. Potter, that spell you performed, it's not taught at Hogwarts. In fact, I've only seen it once before, many years ago. I swallowed hard. Professor, I swear I don't know how I did it. It was like someone else was guiding my hand. McGonagall's expression softened slightly. Be careful, Potter. You're treading on dangerous ground. Some knowledge comes at a great cost. As I left her office, more confused than ever, I nearly collided with Hagrid in the corridor. All right there, Harry, he boomed, steadying me with one massive hand. You look like you've seen a ghost. I managed a weak smile. I'm fine, Hagrid. Just thinking about some stuff. Hagrid's beetle-black eyes crinkled with concern. Well, if you need to clear your head, why don't you come down for a cuppa? Been meaning to talk to you about something anyway. Grateful for the distraction, I followed Hagrid to his hut on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. As we settled in with steaming mugs of tea, I noticed Hagrid seemed unusually nervous. What's on your mind, Hagrid? I asked. He shifted in his seat, which creaked ominously under his weight. Well, it's just... I've been hearing things, Harry. Strange things coming from the forest. I leaned forward, my interest piqued. What kind of strange things? Hagrid lowered his voice, as if afraid of being overheard. There's parts of the forest, Harry, that even I don't go into. Old magic, the centaurs call it, keeps most creatures away. But something's changed, I prompted. Hagrid nodded gravely. It's like the forest is waking up. Creatures are getting restless, moving into areas they've never gone before. And the other night, I could have sworn I saw lights deep in the forest where no one ever goes. A chill ran down my spine. Could this be connected to the awakening of Eleanor's magic? Hagrid, I said carefully, have you ever heard of a fifth Hogwarts founder? The effect was immediate. Hagrid's face paled and he nearly dropped his mug. Where did you hear about that? He whispered. Before I could answer, a piercing scream cut through the air. We both jumped to our feet and rushed outside. At the edge of the forest, a group of students had gathered, pointing at something in the trees. As we approached, I saw what had caused the commotion. Carved into the trunk of an ancient oak was the now familiar symbol of the five-pointed star with a wand at its center. But this was no ordinary carving. It glowed with an eerie blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Everyone back to the castle now! Hagrid bellowed, shooing the students away. As the crowd dispersed, I stayed behind, drawn to the glowing symbol. Hagrid, what does this mean? Hagrid's voice was grim. It means trouble, Harry. The kind of trouble Hogwarts hasn't seen in centuries. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind raced with everything that had happened. The strange transfiguration, Hagrid's warnings, the glowing symbol in the forest. As I tossed and turned, a sudden thought struck me. I grabbed the Marauder's map from my trunk, tapping it with my wand. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good, I whispered. The familiar lines of Hogwarts appeared, but something was different. In the margins of the map, barely visible, was a series of runes I'd never noticed before. As I squinted at them, they seemed to shift and change, forming words. The fifth serpent sleeps beneath the lion's paw, awaiting the call of its true heir. My heart raced, the same words from my dream. But what did they mean? A movement on the map caught my eye. A dot labelled Albus Dumbledore was moving through the corridors, heading towards a part of the castle I'd never seen before. Without thinking, I grabbed my invisibility cloak and slipped out of the dormitory. Under the cover of the cloak, I followed Dumbledore's path on the map. He led me to a section of wall that I could have sworn was just solid stone. But as I watched, Dumbledore tapped the wall with his wand in a complex pattern, and a doorway appeared. I held my breath as Dumbledore entered, slipping in behind him just before the door closed. The room beyond was circular, its walls lined with portraits, hundreds of them, all depicting the same woman at different stages of her life. Dumbledore stood in the center of the room, his back to me. I know you're there, Harry, he said softly, without turning around. Sheepishly, I removed the cloak. Professor, I can explain. Dumbledore held up a hand, silencing me. I think it's time we had a talk, Harry, about Eleanor Evershaw and the true history of Hogwarts. As Dumbledore began to speak, unveiling secrets long buried, I realized that everything I thought I knew about Hogwarts, about magic itself, was about to change. The shadows of the past were rising, and I was standing at the center of a storm that had been brewing for centuries. The weight of this knowledge settled on me like a physical thing. As I looked at the portraits of Eleanor Evershaw, her eyes seeming to follow me, I couldn't help but wonder, was I ready for the truth? And more importantly, what would I do with it once I knew? The great hall was abuzz with whispers as I entered for breakfast. Students huddled in groups, their faces etched with worry as they pored over copies of the Daily Prophet. I slid into a seat next to Ron and Hermione, who were already deep in conversation. What's going on? I asked, reaching for a piece of toast. Hermione pushed the newspaper towards me, her face grim. Read this. The headline screamed, Magical disturbances sweep Britain, ministry baffled. As I scanned the article, my heart sank. Reports of unexplained magical phenomena were pouring in from all over the country. Muggles witnessing impossible events, ancient wards failing, magical creatures appearing in unlikely places. It's got to be connected to what we've been investigating, I murmured, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Ron nodded, his freckled face pale. Dad sent an owl this morning. He says the ministry's in chaos. No one knows what's causing it. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the words from the ancient book. The awakening of the forgotten shall bring forth a tempest of magic unbound. We need to tell Dumbledore. Hermione insisted, but I hesitated. I'm not sure we can trust anyone right now, I said, the weight of our secret pressing down on me. We need more information. As if on cue, Professor McGonagall's voice rang out across the hall. All students, please proceed to your first classes. Remain calm and follow your prefects. The day passed in a blur of tension and whispered conversations. In herbology, Professor Sprout seemed distracted, nearly forgetting to warn us about the venomous tentacula we were repotting. Now, class, she said, wiping her brow. Today we'll be studying a very rare plant, the Lumina noctis, or nightlight bloom. It was thought to be extinct until recently. As she unveiled the delicate, glowing flower, I felt a jolt of recognition. I'd seen this plant before, in a potion recipe in the ancient book. It was a key ingredient in a brew called the Veil Lifter. I caught Hermione's eye, and I could tell she'd made the same connection. We needed to get our hands on some of that plant. After class, as we made our way back to the castle, Neville fell into step beside us. That was brilliant, wasn't it? He said, his round face alight with enthusiasm. I've read about the Lumina Noctis, but I never thought I'd see one. An idea struck me. Neville, I said carefully, do you think Professor Sprout would notice if a few petals went missing? His eyes widened. Harry, you're not thinking of stealing it, are you? What do you need it for? I exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. We'd been keeping our investigation secret, but maybe it was time to bring in some help. Meet us in the room of requirement tonight, I said in a low voice. There's something you need to know. That evening, as we made our way to the 7th floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The corridors seemed darker than usual, the shadows deeper. We found Neville already waiting outside the blank wall where the room of requirement appeared. But he wasn't alone. Luna Lovegood and Ginny stood with him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. I hope you don't mind, Neville said sheepishly. They knew something was up, and well, we thought you might need all the help you can get. For a moment, I felt a flash of anger. This was supposed to be secret, but as I looked at their determined faces, I realized Neville was right. We couldn't do this alone. Once inside the room, which had transformed into a cozy study filled with books and magical instruments, we told them everything. The 5th Founder, the ancient book, the strange events happening across Britain. I knew it, Luna said dreamily. Daddy's been saying for years that Hogwarts' history was incomplete. No one believed him, of course. Ginny leaned forward, her eyes blazing. So what do we do now? How can we help? As we discussed our next steps, a sudden tremor shook the castle. Books fell from shelves, and a fine dust rained down from the ceiling. What was that? Ron yelped, jumping to his feet. Before anyone could answer, a silvery form floated through the wall. It was nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost. You need to come quickly, he said, his usually jovial face grave. Something's happening in the Great Hall. We raced through the corridors, our footsteps echoing in the empty passages. As we approached the Great Hall, we could hear a cacophony of voices and a strange, pulsing energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Pushing open the heavy doors, we were met with a scene of chaos. Students and teachers alike were staring up at the enchanted ceiling, which was no longer showing the night sky. Instead, it swirled with images of the past, fleeting glimpses of Hogwarts through the ages. And there, amid the swirling visions, was a face I recognized from the ancient book. Eleanor Evershaw, the forgotten founder, her eyes seeming to lock with mine across the centuries. Harry, Hermione whispered, clutching my arm, look at the house tables. I tore my gaze away from the ceiling and felt my jaw drop. The 4 long tables were changing, shimmering like mirages, and before our eyes, a 5th table began to materialize in the center of the hall. Dumbledore stood at the head of the room, his wand raised, trying to contain the wild magic. But even he looked shaken, his usual calm demeanor cracking. Everyone remain calm, he called out, his voice magically amplified. Prefects, please escort your houses back to their common rooms immediately. As the hall erupted into panicked movement, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Professor McGonagall, her face pale but determined. Potter, she said in a low voice, I think it's time you told us exactly what you know about Eleanor Evershaw. I swallowed hard, looking at my friends. They nodded encouragingly. Professor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I think it's time Hogwarts learned the truth about its forgotten founder. As I followed McGonagall to Dumbledore's office, the ancient book heavy in my bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The storm we'd inadvertently unleashed was gathering strength, and I feared we might be powerless to stop it. But as I looked at my friends, old and new, walking beside me, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The truth about Eleanora Evershaw and the forgotten history of Hogwarts was about to be revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The corridors of Hogwarts felt different now, charged with an energy I couldn't quite explain. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, every whispered conversation a potential clue. As I made my way to the Great Hall for breakfast, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the verge of something big. Potter. I turned to see Draco Malfoy leaning against a pillar, his usual sneer replaced by an expression I couldn't quite read. Uncertainty? Fear? "What do you want, Malfoy?" I asked, my hand instinctively moving towards my wand. He glanced around, making sure we were alone. "We need to talk. About the fifth founder." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you know about that?" Draco's pale face was drawn, his voice barely above a whisper. "More than I want to. Meet me in the astronomy tower at midnight. Come alone." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving me stunned and confused. At lunch, I shared Draco's message with Ron and Hermione. "It's got to be a trap," Ron said immediately, his mouth full of shepherd's pie. Hermione looked thoughtful. "I don't know, Harry. He seemed genuinely worried on the train. What if he really does know something?" I pushed my food around my plate, my appetite gone. "I have to go. We need all the information we can get." That night, as I climbed the stairs to the astronomy tower, my mind raced with possibilities. Was Draco really going to help us? Or was this all part of some elaborate scheme? He was already there when I arrived, staring out over the grounds. As I approached, he spoke without turning. "My family has secrets, Potter. Dark secrets. And one of them is about her. About Eleanora Evershaw." I felt my breath catch. "What do you know?" Draco finally turned to face me, his eyes haunted. "She was brilliant, Potter. Brilliant and terrifying. The magic she wielded. It was unlike anything the wizarding world had ever seen. And that's why they feared her. Why they erased her." "Who's they?" I pressed. "The Ministry. The other founders. Everyone who was afraid of what her magic could do." He paused, conflict clear on his face. "I shouldn't be telling you this. If my father knew..." I took a step closer. "Draco, we need to know. People could be in danger." He nodded, seeming to come to a decision. "There's an artifact, the Founder's Chalice. It's said to hold Eleanora's most powerful magic. My father, he's been searching for it, and I think he's close." As we talked late into the night, I felt a shift in my understanding of Draco. He wasn't just the sneering bully I'd known for years. He was scared, conflicted, caught between family loyalty and doing what was right. The next day, as I filled Ron and Hermione in on what I'd learned, tensions ran high. "You can't trust him, Harry," Ron exclaimed. "He's a Malfoy." "People can change, Ron," Hermione argued, "and we need all the help we can get." I sighed, feeling the weight of leadership on my shoulders. "I think we have to trust him, for now at least, but we'll be careful." Our debate was cut short as Neville burst into the common room, his round face pale with shock. "It's Hermione," he gasped. "She's been attacked." The world seemed to tilt as we raced to the hospital wing. Hermione lay unconscious, her bushy hair spread out on the pillow. Madame Pomfrey bustled around her, muttering incantations. "What happened?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "We don't know," Madame Pomfrey said grimly. "She was found in the library. It looks like a powerful, stunning spell, but there's something else. Something I can't quite identify." As we stood vigil by Hermione's bed, guilt and anger warred inside me. Who could have done this? And was it connected to our investigation? Later that night, as Ron and I made our way back to Gryffindor Tower, he rounded on me. "This has gone too far, Harry. Hermione's hurt. Who knows who'll be next? Maybe we should just stop. Let sleeping dogs lie." I felt a flash of anger. "We can't stop now, Ron. We're too close. And if we don't figure this out, who knows what could happen?" Ron's face reddened. "Is solving this mystery really worth risking our lives? Worth risking Hermione's life?" His words hit me like a physical blow. Was I being selfish? Reckless? As I opened my mouth to respond, a new voice cut through our argument. "He's right, you know." We turned to see Luna Lovegood standing there, her protuberant eyes even wider than usual. "What do you mean, Luna?" I asked, too tired to be surprised by her sudden appearance. The truth wants to be known, she said dreamily. It's like a blibbering humdinger. The more you try to ignore it, the louder it gets. Despite everything, I felt a smile tug at my lips. So, you think we should keep going? Luna nodded solemnly. Oh yes, but you'll need help. The five must be united, you know. Before I could ask what she meant, she drifted away, humming to herself. Ron and I exchanged bewildered looks. Mental, that one, Ron muttered. But I could see the fight had gone out of him. The next day brought a new challenge. Professor McGonagall announced a school-wide magical tournament designed to promote inter-house unity and showcase the diverse talents of our students. As I listened to the rules and categories, a chill ran down my spine. One of the events was an advanced transfiguration challenge, exactly the kind of magic we'd been researching in relation to Eleanora Evershaw. During the tournament, I found myself facing off against a 7th-year Ravenclaw in the Transfiguration event. As we dueled, transforming objects and conjuring complex forms, I felt a strange power building within me. Without thinking, I cast a spell from the ancient book, one I'd only read about but never attempted. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The entire arena transformed, shimmering with an otherworldly light. When it faded, I stood victorious, but the looks on the faces of the staff told me I'd done something extraordinary and potentially dangerous. As the crowd cheered, I caught Dumbledore's eye. His expression was unreadable, but I could have sworn I saw a flicker of fear. Later, as I recounted the event to Draco in a secluded corner of the castle, his face grew pale. Potter, do you have any idea what you've done? That spell, it's one of Eleanora's, one that was supposed to be lost forever. The implications hit me like a ton of bricks. But how could I have cast it? I've never even practiced it. Draco's voice was grim. I don't know, but whatever's happening, it's bigger than we thought, and I'm not sure any of us are ready for what comes next. As I made my way back to Gryffindor Tower that night, my mind was a whirlwind of questions and fears. The mystery of Eleanora Evershaw was unraveling, but with each new discovery, the stakes seemed to grow higher. I thought of Hermione, still unconscious in the hospital wing, of Ron's doubts and Luna's cryptic words, of Draco's warnings and the fear I'd seen in Dumbledore's eyes. Whatever was coming, one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. And as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was yet to come. The Great Hall was eerily quiet as I entered, the usual chatter replaced by hushed whispers and furtive glances. News of our discoveries had spread like wildfire through the castle, and the air was thick with tension and anticipation. As I took my seat at the Gryffindor table, Hermione leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. Harry, look at the staff table. I glanced up, my heart skipping a beat. Among the familiar faces of our professors sat a stranger, a woman with long dark hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to bore right through me. She was deep in conversation with Dumbledore, their heads bent close together. Who is she? Ron asked, his mouth full of toast. I don't know, I muttered, but she looks familiar somehow. As if sensing our gaze, the woman looked up, her eyes locking with mine. A jolt of recognition shot through me. I'd seen those eyes before, in my dreams. Suddenly, Dumbledore stood, raising his hands for silence. The hall fell quiet immediately. Students, faculty, he began, his voice grave. I'm sure you've all heard the rumors circulating our hallowed halls. Today we stand on the precipice of a revelation that will change the very foundations of our understanding of Hogwarts history, murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt Hermione's hand grip my arm tightly. It is my solemn duty to introduce you to Elara Evershaw, Dumbledore continued, gesturing to the dark-haired woman. A direct descendant of Eleanora Evershaw, the 5th founder of Hogwarts. The hall erupted into chaos. Shouts of disbelief mingled with excited chatter. At the Slytherin table, I saw Draco Malfoy's face turn pale, his eyes wide with shock. Silence! Dumbledore's voice boomed, magically amplified. As the noise died down, he continued. I know this comes as a shock to many of you. The truth about Eleanora Evershaw has been hidden for centuries, but recent events have forced us to confront our past. I felt all eyes turn to me, and I sank lower in my seat. In light of these revelations, classes will be suspended for the day, Dumbledore announced. I urge you all to treat this information and each other with respect and understanding. There will be a full school assembly this evening to address your questions. As Dumbledore sat down, the hall once again filled with the buzz of excited conversation. I turned to Ron and Hermione, my mind reeling. "We did it," Hermione breathed, her eyes shining. "We actually did it." Ron nodded, looking dazed. "Blimey, Harry. We've rewritten history." Before I could respond, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see Professor McGonagall standing behind me, her face unreadable. "Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley," she said crisply. "The headmaster would like to see you in his office immediately." As we followed McGonagall through the winding corridors, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. We'd uncovered the truth, yes, but at what cost? Dumbledore's office was crowded when we arrived. The headmaster himself sat behind his desk, flanked by Elara Evershaw and, to my surprise, the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. "Ah, Harry," Dumbledore said, his blue eyes twinkling. "I believe you've been at the center of this revelation." I swallowed hard. "Professor, I can explain." Elara Evershaw stepped forward, cutting me off. "There's no need to explain, Mr. Potter. You've done what generations of witches and wizards could not. You've brought the truth to light." Fudge huffed, his face red. "Truth? This is nothing but a fabrication, a ploy to undermine the very foundations of our society." "With all due respect, Minister," Hermione interjected, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness, "we have proof. The Founder's Chalice." "Ah yes, this mysterious artifact," Fudge sneered. "Conveniently discovered by a group of students. How very convenient." Dumbledore raised a hand, silencing the room. "Cornelius, I understand your skepticism, but the evidence is irrefutable. Eleanora Evershaw was real, and her contribution to Hogwarts cannot be denied any longer." As the adults argued, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. The room seemed to fade away, replaced by a vision of the castle as it must have looked centuries ago. 5 figures stood before me, the founders, including Eleanora. "The time has come," Eleanora's voice echoed in my mind. "The chalice must be found." I blinked, the vision disappearing as quickly as it had come. I realized everyone was staring at me. "Harry?" Dumbledore asked, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right?" I took a deep breath. "The Founder's Chalice," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "It's here in the castle, and I think I know where to find it." Elara's eyes widened. "The chalice, but it's been lost for centuries." "Not lost," I corrected. "Hidden, and it's time we found it." Despite Fudge's protests, we soon found ourselves deep in the bowels of the castle, following my instincts. Ron, Hermione, Elara, Dumbledore, and even a reluctant Fudge trailed behind me. As we descended into a part of the dungeons I'd never seen before, the air grew thick with ancient magic. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with energy. "Here," I said, stopping before a blank stone wall. "It's behind here." Dumbledore stepped forward, running his hand over the stones. "Ingenious," he murmured. "A concealment charm so powerful it's lasted for a millennium." With a wave of his wand, the wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden chamber. And there, on a pedestal in the center of the room, sat a silver chalice adorned with 5 distinct symbols, one for each founder. As we entered the chamber, a series of magical traps sprung to life. Hermione's quick thinking and Ron's strategic mind helped us navigate through a maze of challenges clearly designed to test the virtues of all 5 houses. Finally, we stood before the chalice. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and grasped it. The moment my fingers touched the cool silver, a surge of magic coursed through me. Images flashed before my eyes, the founding of Hogwarts, the creation of the houses, and the bitter conflict that led to Eleanora's erasure from history. As the vision faded, I found myself on my knees, the chalice clutched to my chest. The others stared at me in awe and concern. "Harry," Dumbledore said softly, "what did you see?" I looked up, meeting Elara's gaze. "Everything," I whispered. "I saw everything." As I recounted the vision, I could see the weight of centuries lifting from Elara's shoulders. Tears glistened in her eyes as the truth of her ancestors' legacy was finally revealed. Even Fudge seemed shaken. This changes everything," he muttered. "No," I said, rising to my feet. "It doesn't change anything. It just reveals what's always been true. Hogwarts was founded on the principle of unity, all types of magic, all types of witches and wizards working together. That's what we've forgotten, and that's what we need to remember." As we made our way back to the upper levels of the castle, the Founder's Chalice safely in our possession, I couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. We'd uncovered the truth, yes, but now came the hard part, facing the consequences of that truth. The wizarding world was about to change, and I was at the center of it all. As we emerged into the great hall, faced with a sea of expectant faces, I took a deep breath. It was time to share what we'd learned, and to face whatever came next, together. The great hall buzzed with an energy I'd never felt before. Students from all houses huddled together, whispering excitedly. At the staff table, the professors looked tense, their eyes darting nervously around the room. Dumbledore's seat remained conspicuously empty. "This is it," Hermione whispered, her face pale but determined. "Everything changes today." Ron nodded grimly. "For better or worse." I clutched the Founder's chalice beneath my robes, its weight a constant reminder of the responsibility we now carried. The events of the past few days swirled in my mind. The final battle in the hidden chamber, the revelations about Eleanor Evershaw, and the shocking truth about Hogwarts' founding. Suddenly, the doors of the Great Hall burst open. Dumbledore strode in, followed by Minister Fudge, a group of stern-looking ministry officials, and to my surprise, Elara Evershaw, the descendant of Eleanor we'd met during our quest. "Students, faculty," Dumbledore's voice rang out, magically amplified. "I'm sure you're all aware that certain truths about our school's history have come to light." A hush fell over the hall. I could feel hundreds of eyes turn towards me. "Mr. Potter," Fudge said, his voice dripping with barely concealed anger, "I believe you have something that belongs to the ministry." I stood slowly, my hand still on the chalice. "With all due respect, Minister, this doesn't belong to the ministry. It belongs to Hogwarts, to all of us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Fudge's face reddened. "Now see here, boy." "No, you see here," I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. "For centuries, the truth about Eleanor Evershaw has been hidden, but it's time everyone knew the whole story." With trembling hands, I placed the Founder's chalice on the table. Its silver surface gleamed in the candlelight, the 5 symbols of the Founders clearly visible. "Eleanor Evershaw wasn't erased because she was dark or dangerous," I said, my voice growing stronger. "She was erased because she believed that all types of magic should be studied and understood, even the ones some found frightening." Elara stepped forward, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "My ancestor saw magic not as good or evil, but as a force of nature to be respected and learned from. She wanted Hogwarts to be a place where no branch of magic was forbidden, where students could reach their full potential." "But the other Founders feared her ideas," Hermione chimed in. "They worried that unrestricted study of all magics could lead to dark wizards rising to power." Ron nodded. "So they made a choice. They erased Eleanor from history, limited what could be taught at Hogwarts, and created the house system to divide students based on their traits." The hall erupted into chaos. Students shouted questions, professors tried to maintain order, and Fudge looked like he might explode at any moment. "Silence!" Dumbledore's voice boomed, quieting the crowd instantly. He turned to me, his blue eyes twinkling with what looked like pride. "Harry, I believe you have more to tell us." I took a deep breath. The Founder's chalice showed us the truth. Eleanor's magic wasn't dark. It was balanced. She believed that true mastery of magic came from understanding all its aspects, not just the ones we're comfortable with. I raised the chalice, and to everyone's amazement, it began to glow. 5 distinct colors of light emerged: red, blue, yellow, green, and a shimmering silver. "These represent the 5 elements of magic," I explained. "Fire, water, air, earth, and ether, the 5th element that binds them all together." Eleanor's research into ether magic was what frightened the others. They couldn't understand it, so they feared it. Elara stepped forward. "But now we have a chance to rectify this mistake, to honor Eleanor's vision and create a Hogwarts that embraces all types of magic, that teaches balance and understanding rather than division." The hall fell silent as the weight of this revelation settled over everyone. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It started at the Ravenclaw table and spread until the entire hall was cheering. Fudge, however, was not convinced. "This is preposterous. You can't just change centuries of magical education on the word of a few students and a magical cup." "Actually, Cornelius," Dumbledore said calmly, "I believe we can, and we must. Hogwarts has always been autonomous from the ministry, and as headmaster, I fully support this change." The next few hours were a blur of heated discussions, impromptu votes, and passionate speeches. By the end of it, a decision had been reached. Hogwarts would undergo a transformation. The house system would remain, but students would have more freedom to study across house lines. A new curriculum would be developed, incorporating Eleanor's teachings about balanced magic. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows of the Great Hall, I found myself standing with Ron, Hermione, and Elara, watching as students from all houses mingled excitedly, discussing the changes to come. "I can't believe we actually did it," Ron said, shaking his head in disbelief. Hermione beamed. "It's going to be so much work, redesigning the curriculum, but think of all we'll learn." Elara placed a hand on my shoulder. "Thank you, Harry. You've restored my family's legacy and given Hogwarts a chance to become what it was always meant to be." I felt a warmth spread through me, but also a twinge of unease. But what if the other founders were right? What if this leads to dark wizards gaining more power? "That's always a risk," Dumbledore said, appearing beside us. "But I believe that knowledge, understanding, and unity are our best defenses against the dark arts. By teaching balance, we make it less likely that students will be tempted by extremes." As the evening wore on, I found myself standing by a window, looking out over the Hogwarts grounds. The castle itself seemed different somehow, as if it was awakening to its true potential. "Quite a day, eh, Potter?" I turned to see Draco Malfoy standing nearby, his usual sneer replaced by a look of grudging respect. "Yeah," I replied cautiously, "quite a day." Draco hesitated, then held out his hand. I think Eleanora might have had the right idea, about unity and balance." Stunned, I shook his hand. As Draco walked away, I realized that this was just the beginning. The changes we'd set in motion would have far-reaching consequences, not just for Hogwarts, but for the entire wizarding world. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, I felt a sense of both excitement and trepidation. We'd uncovered the truth about Eleanora Evershaw and reshaped Hogwarts in the process. But our journey was far from over. New challenges lay ahead, integrating Eleanora's teachings, navigating the political fallout, and preparing for whatever new threats might arise in this changed magical landscape. But as I looked at my friends, at the united students around me, and at the Founder's chalice gleaming on the table, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. The dawn of a new era had arrived at Hogwarts, and I couldn't wait to see what it would bring. Now let's move on to the next apocalypse story. I sat at my desk in the Aura office, buried under a mountain of paperwork. Another day, another dark wizard to track down. Sometimes I wondered if I'd ever truly escaped the shadow of Voldemort. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a reminder of the mundane rhythm my life had settled into. Suddenly, a tawny owl swooped through the open window, dropping a red envelope on my desk. My heart skipped a beat. A howler, but as I reached for it, I realized it wasn't smoking. Just an urgent message, then. I broke the seal and Minister Shacklebolt's voice filled the room. "Harry, come to St. Mungo's immediately. There's been an incident." The gravity in Kingsley's voice sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my wand and cloak, dashing out of the office. As I ran through the ministry atrium, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Apparating to St. Mungo's, I found the hospital in chaos. Healers rushed back and forth, their faces etched with confusion and fear. I spotted a flash of red hair, Ron, standing pale-faced next to Hermione. "Ron! Hermione! What's going on?" I called out, pushing through the crowd. Hermione turned, her eyes wide with worry. "Harry, it's happening everywhere. Wizards are losing their magic." I felt as if I'd been hit by a stunning spell. "What? How is that possible?" Ron raised his wand, his hand shaking. "Lumos," he whispered. Nothing happened. He tried again, his voice cracking. "Lumos." Still nothing. The realization hit me like a bludger to the chest. Ron, my best friend, the wizard who'd stood by me through everything, was now a muggle. "When did this happen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "About an hour ago," Hermione replied, squeezing Ron's hand. "We were at home and suddenly Ron couldn't perform even the simplest spell. We came here immediately, but..." She gestured around the crowded waiting room. "We're not the only ones." A commotion near the entrance caught our attention. A group of wizards were arguing loudly with the reception witch. "What do you mean, there's no cure?" one wizard shouted. "I've got a shop to run in Diagon Alley. How am I supposed to do that without magic?" "Please, sir, we're doing everything we can," the witch pleaded. "The healers are working round the clock to understand what's happening." I turned back to Ron and Hermione. "Has anyone from the ministry arrived yet?" As if on cue, Kingsley's deep voice boomed through the hall. "May I have your attention, please?" The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to the Minister of Magic. I know you're all frightened and confused. I assure you, we are doing everything in our power to understand and resolve this situation. For now, I ask that you remain calm and cooperate with the healers. A witch near us scoffed. Remain calm? My entire life has just been turned upside down, Kingsley continued. We've assembled a task force to investigate this phenomenon. Harry, he caught my eye. I'd like you to lead it. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. As I made my way to Kingsley, whispers followed me. It's Harry Potter. Can he fix this? If anyone can, it's him. Their faith in me was both comforting and terrifying. What if I couldn't solve this? Kingsley pulled me aside. Harry, I need you to go to Hogwarts. Consult with the portraits of the former headmasters. If anyone might have encountered something like this before, it would be them. Of course, I replied. But what about Ron and the others here? We'll take care of them, Kingsley assured me. Right now, we need answers. As I prepared to leave, Hermione caught my arm. Harry, be careful. We don't know what's causing this. It could affect you too. I gave her a reassuring smile. I'll be fine. Take care of Ron. With a crack, I apparated to Hogsmeade and made my way to Hogwarts. The castle loomed before me, a beacon of magical learning for centuries. What would become of it if this continued? Inside the headmaster's office, I found Professor McGonagall pacing anxiously. Potter, thank goodness you're here, she said. I assume you've been briefed. I nodded. It's bad, Professor. I've never seen anything like it. Nor have I, she replied grimly. The portraits are at your disposal. I hope they can provide some insight. I turned to the wall of portraits, my eyes immediately finding Dumbledore's. His blue eyes twinkled, but there was concern behind them. Harry, my boy, he said softly. Dark times have found us once again, it seems. Professor, have you ever heard of magic just disappearing like this? Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. Not on this scale, no. But there have been whispers, legends of artifacts capable of manipulating the very essence of magic. Phineas Nigellus Black's portrait chimed in, his voice dripping with disdain. Preposterous! Magic is in our blood. It can't simply vanish. Can't it? I challenged. Then how do you explain what's happening? The portraits erupted into argument, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of theories and rebuttals. I closed my eyes, trying to think. Suddenly, a quiet voice cut through the noise. The Equalizer Stone. I turned to see the portrait of a witch I didn't recognize. She was ancient, her painted face lined with centuries of wisdom. The what? I asked. The Equalizer Stone, she repeated. A powerful artifact, created in the time of Merlin. It was said to have the power to grant or remove magical abilities. My heart raced. Could this be the answer? Where can I find it? The old witch shook her head. It was lost, centuries ago, hidden away for the good of all. I turned to McGonagall. Professor, I need access to the restricted section of the library. Any books on ancient artifacts, especially this Equalizer Stone. She nodded. Of course, Potter. Whatever you need. As I hurried out of the office, Dumbledore's voice followed me. Be cautious, Harry. Power like that, it can corrupt even the purest of hearts. I spent hours in the library, poring over dusty tomes and ancient scrolls. My eyes burned, my head ached, but I couldn't stop. With each passing minute, more wizards could be losing their magic. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I found it, a small mention of the Equalizer Stone, in a book so old it nearly crumbled in my hands. Last seen in the possession of the Goblin King, I read aloud. Gringotts, it has to be in Gringotts. I rushed out of the castle, mounting my broom. As I soared towards London, the wind whipping through my hair, I couldn't shake a feeling of dread. What if I was too late? What if I found the stone, only to have my own magic stripped away? The sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It was beautiful, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was Ron's face, as he failed to cast a simple Lumos charm, the fear in the eyes of the wizards at St. Mungo's, the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. I'll fix this, I whispered to myself, urging my broom faster. I have to. Little did I know, the true challenge was only beginning. The Muggle metamorphosis was underway, and it would test not just my magical abilities, but the very core of who I was and everything I believed about the wizarding world. The marble halls of Gringotts echoed with an unusual tension, as I strode in, my aura robes billowing behind me. Goblins huddled in whispered conversations, their beady eyes darting suspiciously. Something was definitely amiss. I approached a teller, trying to keep my voice low. "I need to speak with the chief goblin. It's a matter of utmost urgency." The goblin sneered, revealing pointed teeth. "The chief is quite busy, Mr. Potter. Perhaps you'd like to make an appointment for next month?" I leaned in, my patience wearing thin. "Listen, you know what's happening out there. Wizards losing their magic left and right. I have reason to believe Gringotts might be connected. So unless you want the full force of the ministry descending upon this bank, I suggest you get me that meeting. Now." The goblin's eyes widened, and he scurried away without another word. Moments later, I was ushered into a lavishly decorated office where an ancient goblin sat behind an enormous desk. "Mr. Potter," he growled, "I hope you have a good reason for this intrusion." I cut straight to the chase. "What do you know about the Equalizer Stone?" The chief goblin's face remained impassive, but I caught a flicker of recognition in his eyes. A myth, a fairy tale told to goblin children. A fairy tale that was supposedly last seen in the possession of the Goblin King, I countered. And now, coincidentally, wizards are losing their magic. Care to explain? He leaned back, steepling his long fingers. "Mr. Potter, I assure you, if such an artifact existed and was in our possession, it would be perfectly secure." "Would be?" I latched onto his choice of words. "So you're saying it's not here?" A long pause followed. Finally, the goblin sighed. "There was a break-in 3 nights ago." My heart raced. Why wasn't this reported? "Gringotts has a reputation to maintain," he said stiffly. "We were conducting our own investigation." "Well, your secret-keeping might have cost us valuable time," I snapped. "I need to see where this break-in occurred, now." Reluctantly, the chief goblin led me deep into the bowels of Gringotts. We descended in a rickety cart, plunging into darkness that even Lumos struggled to penetrate. Finally, we screeched to a halt before a massive vault door hanging open on its hinges. "Vault 713, the goblin announced. "One of our highest security vaults." I stepped inside, my wand raised. The vault was empty, save for a pedestal in the center. Upon it sat a velvet cushion, a circular impression in its center where something had clearly rested. "The Equalizer Stone," I breathed. "It's real, and someone has it." As we ascended back to the main floor, my mind raced. Who could have pulled off such a heist? And more importantly, why were they using the stone to strip magic from wizards? I burst out of Gringotts, nearly colliding with a frantic-looking Hermione. "Harry, thank goodness I found you," she gasped. "There's a situation at the ministry. You need to come quickly." We apparated directly into the ministry atrium, materializing in the midst of chaos. A crowd had gathered, their angry voices echoing off the marble walls. At the center stood Draco Malfoy, his pale face flushed with righteous anger. "This is a plague upon our world," Malfoy shouted. "Those affected must be quarantined before they spread their condition." "They're still people, Malfoy," someone in the crowd yelled back. "You can't just lock them away." I pushed through the throng, Hermione at my heels. "That's enough, Malfoy," I called out. "You're inciting panic." Draco's eyes narrowed as he spotted me. "Ah, if it isn't the great Harry Potter, come to save the day again, have you? Tell me, how does it feel to be so utterly useless in the face of this crisis?" I bit back a retort, knowing he was trying to provoke me. "We're working on a solution. In the meantime, we need to stay united." "United?" Draco scoffed. "With them?" He gestured to a group of clearly affected wizards, struggling to perform simple spells. "They're not even wizards anymore. They're muggles." He spat the last word like a curse. Anger flared within me. I stepped closer to Malfoy, my voice low and dangerous. "Careful, Draco. That kind of talk led to Voldemort's rise. Or have you forgotten which side you ended up on?" Malfoy's face paled even further, if that was possible. For a moment, I thought he might draw his wand. Instead, he sneered and turned away. "This isn't over, Potter." As the crowd began to disperse, Hermione tugged at my sleeve. "Harry, what did you find at Gringotts?" I quickly filled her in on the Equalizer Stone and the break-in. Her eyes widened with each word. "Oh, Harry," she whispered. "This is worse than we thought. If someone is wielding that kind of power—" "I know," I nodded grimly. "We need to track it down fast, but where do we even start?" A commotion near the lifts caught our attention. Ron stumbled out, looking disoriented and panicked. "Ron!" Hermione cried, rushing to his side. "What are you doing here?" "You should be resting." I had to come," Ron panted. "Harry, you won't believe what I saw." "What is it, mate?" I asked, concern etched on my face. Ron's eyes darted around nervously before he leaned in close. "There were these wizards in Nocturne Alley. They could still do magic, and they were laughing about all this." A chill ran down my spine. "Are you sure?" Ron nodded vigorously. "Positive. They were using some kind of amulet. It glowed when they cast spells." I exchanged a significant look with Hermione. Could this be connected to the Equalizer Stone? "Ron, this is important," I said, gripping his shoulder. "Did you recognize any of them?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I did. One of them was Theodore Nott." The pieces started falling into place. Nott, a former Slytherin with ties to Death Eaters, the break-in at Gringotts, the selective nature of the magic loss. "We need to move fast," I said, my mind already formulating a plan. "Hermione, I need you to dig up everything you can on the Equalizer Stone. Ancient texts, legends, anything that might give us a clue on how to counter its effects." She nodded, determination glinting in her eyes. "I'm on it. I'll start in the Department of Mysteries." "Ron," I turned to my best friend, hating what I was about to ask. "I need you to go back to Nocturne Alley. Keep an eye out for Nott or anyone suspicious. But be careful. Without your magic." "I can handle it, Harry," Ron said firmly, though I could see the fear behind his eyes. Magic or no magic, I'm still an aura. As they hurried off on their tasks, I couldn't shake a growing sense of dread. This was bigger than anything we'd faced since Voldemort. And this time, the enemy wasn't just targeting Muggleborns or half-bloods. They were threatening the very fabric of our world. I made my way to the Aura office, my mind racing. We needed to organize a task force, set up surveillance in Nocturne Alley, and somehow find a way to track the Equalizer Stone, all while keeping the increasingly panicked wizarding population from tearing itself apart. As I reached for the door handle, a searing pain shot through my hand. I jerked back, staring in disbelief as my fingers began to glow with an eerie light. "No," I whispered, my heart pounding. "Not now. Please, not now." I raised my wand with a shaking hand. "Lumos," I whispered. Nothing happened. The savior of the wizarding world, the chosen one, was losing his magic, and the mystery had only begun to unravel. I stared at my wand, willing it to light up, to show any sign of the magic that had been a part of me for so long. Nothing. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced it down. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. A knock at the door made me jump. "Come in," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. Neville Longbottom entered, his round face creased with worry. "Harry, we've got a situation at Hogwarts. McGonagall's requesting your presence immediately." I nodded, pocketing my unresponsive wand. "Let's go." As we hurried to the atrium to use the flu network, Neville filled me in. "It's chaos, Harry. Students are losing their magic left and right. Some of the purebloods are talking about leaving, saying the school's been contaminated." My heart sank. Hogwarts had always been a sanctuary, a place of unity despite house rivalries. To hear it was falling apart. "What about you, Neville? Your magic?" He gave a wan smile. "Still here for now, but who knows for how long." We emerged from the fireplace in McGonagall's office to find the headmistress in heated discussion with several portraits. "Mr. Potter, Mr. Longbottom, thank you for coming so quickly," McGonagall said, her Scottish brogue more pronounced in her stress. "Professor, what's the situation?" I asked. She gestured to the window. "See for yourself." I approached, and my breath caught in my throat. The Quidditch pitch was in chaos. Players hovered uncertainly on their brooms while others plummeted towards the ground, their ability to fly suddenly gone. "Merlin's beard," I whispered. "We need to get them down safely." "Already on it," Neville said, raising his wand. "Arresto momentum." The falling players slowed, gently touching down on the pitch. I felt a pang of uselessness, unable to help. "It's not just Quidditch," McGonagall continued. "Classes are in disarray. Students can't perform the simplest spells, and the pure blood families, they're demanding we segregate the affected students." "That's ridiculous," I snapped. "We can't divide the school like that." A cold voice from behind us made me turn. "Can't we, Potter?" Draco Malfoy stood in the doorway, his pale, pointed face set in a sneer. Always the hero, aren't you, even when you're powerless to help? I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out. What are you doing here, Malfoy? Protecting my son's interest, he replied smoothly, and those of every other pure-blood student at risk of contamination. Contamination? Neville echoed incredulously. It's not a disease, Malfoy. Draco's eyes flashed. Isn't it? It's spreading, isn't it? Stripping away what makes us wizards. Tell me, Potter, have you tried casting a spell lately? I felt the blood drain from my face. How did he know? A commotion outside saved me from responding. We rushed to the window to see a group of students facing off in the courtyard, wands drawn. We need to stop this, I said, already moving towards the door. And how do you propose to do that without magic? Draco called after me, his mocking laughter following us down the spiral staircase. We burst into the courtyard just as spells started flying. I dodged a stray stunning spell, acutely aware of my inability to shield myself. Enough! McGonagall's voice, magically amplified, brought the duel to a halt. All of you, to your common rooms immediately. As the students dispersed, I caught sight of a familiar face. Albus? My son turned, his green eyes, so like mine, wide with fear. Dad, he said, his voice small. What's happening? Why can't I do magic anymore? My heart broke. I wanted to tell him it would be all right, that we'd fix this. But I couldn't bring myself to make promises I wasn't sure I could keep. We're working on it, Al, I said, pulling him into a hug. I need you to be brave, okay? Help look after the younger students. He nodded, squaring his shoulders in a way that reminded me painfully of myself at his age. As he walked away, I turned to McGonagall. We need to do something, and fast. This division, it's exactly what Voldemort would have wanted. I quite agree, Potter, she said grimly. But what do you suggest? Before I could answer, a silvery Patronus, a jackrabbit, bounded into the courtyard. Luna's dreamy voice emanated from it. Harry, come quickly. The Forbidden Forest. The centaurs have news. Exchanging a quick glance with Neville and McGonagall, I set off towards the forest. As we approached the tree line, an arrow whizzed past my ear, embedding itself in a nearby trunk. That's close enough, humans, a deep voice rumbled. Bane, the centaur leader, emerged from the shadows, his wild black hair matted and his eyes feverish. Bane, I said cautiously. Luna Lovegood sent us. She said you had news. The centaur pawed the ground nervously. The stars speak of a great balancing, Potter, a reckoning long overdue. What do you mean? I pressed. Is this about the equalizer stone? Bane's eyes widened. You know of the stone, then you know the danger it poses. It seeks to right an ancient wrong, to restore the balance between magical and non-magical. By turning everyone into muggles? Neville asked incredulously. Perhaps, Bane replied, or perhaps by giving all the power of magic. The stars are unclear, but know this, Harry Potter, worse is yet to come. The divide you see now, it is but a crack compared to the chasm that awaits. A chill ran down my spine. How do we stop it? Bane shook his head. That is for you to discover, but remember, sometimes to heal one must first lance the wound, be prepared for the poison that will flow. With that cryptic warning, he melted back into the forest, leaving us with more questions than answers. As we made our way back to the castle, I couldn't shake a feeling of impending doom. The wizarding world was fracturing, and I, the one everyone looked to for solutions, was powerless to stop it. Neville must have sensed my despair. He placed a hand on my shoulder. We'll figure this out, Harry. We always do. I nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. But as we crested the hill and Hogwarts came into view, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost? The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grounds. In the fading light, I saw groups of students huddled together, some consoling those who had lost their magic, others eyeing their peers with suspicion. The divide was widening, and time was running out. As we entered the castle, a commotion from the Great Hall caught our attention. Rushing inside, we found a scene of utter chaos. Food floated in the air, benches overturned, and in the center of it all stood Peeves the poltergeist, cackling with glee. Ooh, ickle students can't do magic, he taunted, pelting the defenseless children with mashed potatoes. Peeves is the most powerful one now. In that moment, something snapped inside me. Magic or no magic, I was still Harry Potter. I'd faced Voldemort without a wand. I could handle one mischievous poltergeist. Peeves, I roared, my voice carrying an authority I didn't feel. That's enough. The poltergeist turned, his wicked grin faltering as he met my gaze. For a moment, the hall fell silent. Then, to everyone's amazement, Peeves saluted and vanished with a pop. As I helped the students to their feet, I caught Neville's eye. He nodded, a glimmer of hope in his expression. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this after all. But as the adrenaline faded, I felt the weight of responsibility settle back on my shoulders. The equalizer stone was still out there, and with it, the fate of the entire wizarding world. Tomorrow, I decided, we would take the fight to Nocturne Alley. It was time to flush out Theodore Nott and get some real answers. Little did I know the answers I sought would shake the very foundations of everything I thought I knew about magic and about myself. The cobblestones of Nocturne Alley glistened with an oily sheen as I made my way through the twisted street. Even in broad daylight, shadows seemed to cling to every corner. I kept my hood pulled low, acutely aware of my magical vulnerability. Psst, Harry! I nearly jumped out of my skin before recognizing Ron's voice. He emerged from a shadowy alcove, his face pale but determined. "Any sign of Nott?" I whispered. Ron shook his head. "Nothing yet, but there's something else. Ollivander's here." My brow furrowed. "Ollivander? What's he doing in Nocturne Alley?" "Dunno, but he was asking for you. Said it was urgent." I hesitated. We were here to find Nott, to get answers about the equalizer stone. But Ollivander, if anyone knew about the connection between wizards and their magic, it was him. "All right," I decided. "Where is he?" Ron led me to a dingy shop tucked between a cursed antique store and an apothecary that reeked of decay. A faded sign read, "Ye Olde Wand Shop." Inside, the air was thick with dust and the lingering scent of wood polish. Ollivander stood behind a rickety counter, his silvery eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Ah, Mr. Potter," he said softly. "Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. How I've longed to see how it's matured." I pulled out my wand, feeling a pang of loss as I handed it over. It's not working anymore, sir." Ollivander examined the wand closely, turning it over in his long fingers. "Curious," he murmured. "Very curious indeed." "Sir," I pressed, "do you know anything about what's happening, about the equalizer stone?" The old wand-maker's eyes snapped to mine. "The equalizer stone? So it's true then. It's been found." Ron stepped forward. "You know about it?" Ollivander nodded slowly. "An ancient artifact, Mr. Weasley, created in a time when the line between magical and non-magical was less defined." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Tell me, Mr. Potter," Ollivander said, his gaze intense. "Where does magic truly reside? In the wand? In the words of a spell?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. I'd never really thought about it before. Ollivander smiled knowingly. "The answer, my dear boy, is in the heart. Magic is intent, is will, is the very essence of who we are. The wand is but a focus, a channel." "But then why can't we do magic anymore?" Ron asked, frustration evident in his voice. "Because you believe you can't," Ollivander replied simply. "The equalizer stone doesn't remove magic, Mr. Weasley. It removes the belief in magic." My mind reeled. "So you're saying we can still do magic? We just need to believe?" Ollivander's expression turned grave. "It's not quite that simple, I'm afraid. The stone's power runs deep. It taps into ancient magics, older than Hogwarts itself. To overcome its effects would require a feat of will unlike anything in living memory." A commotion outside interrupted our conversation. Shouts and the sound of spells being cast echoed through the alley. "It's not!" Ron exclaimed, peering through the grimy window. "He's dueling someone!" I rushed to the door, my heart pounding. This was our chance. "Mr. Potter," Ollivander called after me. "Remember, the magic is in you. It always has been." With a nod of thanks, I burst out into the alley, Ron at my heels. The scene before us was chaos. Theodore Nott stood in the middle of the street, firing spells at a hooded figure who dodged and weaved with inhuman speed. "Stupefy!" Nott shouted, a jet of red light erupting from his wand. The hooded figure leapt impossibly high, landing on a nearby roof. As they turned, I caught a glimpse of pointed ears and sharp teeth. A vampire. "Potter!" Nott spat, noticing us. "Come to join the fun." I raised my hands, showing I was unarmed. "It's over, Nott. We know about the equalizer stone." Nott's face contorted with rage. "You know nothing. Do you have any idea what this power could do? We could reshape the world." "By taking away everyone's magic," Ron shouted. That's mad. Taking away? Not laughed, a manic gleam in his eyes. Oh no, Weasley. We're going to give magic to everyone. Muggles, squibs, everyone. No more hiding, no more statute of secrecy. A world where magic is free for all. The vampire chose that moment to attack, leaping from the rooftop with inhuman grace. Not spun, his wand a blur. Incendio! A gout of flame engulfed the vampire, who shrieked and fled, trailing smoke. In that moment of distraction, I acted. Remembering Ollivander's words, I focused all my will, all my intent, into a single thought. Expelliarmus. To my shock and knots, his wand flew from his hand, clattering to the cobblestones at my feet. Knot stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. How did you do that? The stone's power should have... The magic was always there, I said, surprised at the steadiness in my voice. It just needed a reminder. Ron moved quickly, binding Knot with conjured ropes. As he did, a small object fell from Knot's robes, an amulet glowing with an inner light. The equalizer stone, I breathed, reaching for it. Harry, don't, Ron warned. But as my fingers closed around the stone, I felt no surge of power, no great revelation, just a faint warmth, like a long-forgotten memory. It's just a focus, I realized aloud, like a wand. The real power is in us, Ron finished, his eyes wide with understanding. As auras began to apparate into the alley, responding to the disturbance, I pocketed the stone. We had a lot of work ahead of us. The wizarding world was still in chaos, and there were surely others like Knot who would seek to abuse this power. But for the first time since this crisis began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We'd forgotten the most fundamental truth of magic, but now we had a chance to remember, to teach others. As we led Knot away, I caught sight of Ollivander watching from his shop door. He gave me a small nod, a twinkle in his eye. The heart of magic, I realized, had been within us all along. Now we just had to help the rest of the wizarding world remember. But as we apparated back to the ministry with our prisoner, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. If the equalizer stone could make us forget our magic, what else might it be capable of? And more importantly, who else might be seeking its power? The mystery of the Muggle metamorphosis was far from over. In fact, I had a feeling we were just scratching the surface of a much deeper, more ancient magic, one that could either save our world or tear it apart. The choppy waters of the North Sea sprayed my face as our small boat fought against the waves. Hermione stood at the bow, her hair whipping wildly in the wind, while Ron gripped the sides, looking decidedly green. "Are you sure about this, Harry?" Hermione shouted over the roar of the engine. "Following the magical signature of the equalizer stone to an unplottable island seems risky." I nodded grimly. "It's our best lead." Knott's interrogation revealed that the stone's power is tied to this place. If we want to truly understand it, this is where we need to go. As if in response to my words, a thick blanket of mist suddenly enveloped us. The temperature dropped sharply, and an eerie silence fell. "Blimey," Ron muttered, his queasiness forgotten. "Reminds me of the Dementors." I felt it too, a creeping sense of dread, of forgotten sorrows bubbling to the surface. But there was something else. A pull, like a faint whisper calling my name. "There!" I pointed to a dark shape looming out of the mist. "I think that's it." As we drew closer, the island revealed itself. Jagged cliffs rose from the churning sea, topped by dense, gnarled trees. At the highest point stood the ruins of what might once have been a tower. We beached our boat on a narrow strip of pebbled shore. As soon as my feet touched the ground, I felt a surge of something, not quite magic as I knew it, but a deep primal energy that seemed to pulse through the very rocks. "Do you feel that?" I asked, looking at my friends. Hermione nodded, her eyes wide. "It's like the island itself is alive." Ron, however, looked puzzled. "I don't feel anything. Are you sure you're not imagining things?" A chill ran down my spine. Was this another effect of the equalizer stone? Could only those who had regained their belief in magic sense the island's power? We made our way up a winding path, the mist curling around our ankles like spectral tendrils. As we neared the ruined tower, strange symbols carved into the rocks began to appear. Hermione traced one with her finger. "These are ancient, older than any runic system I've studied. They speak of balance and choice." Suddenly, a voice echoed from all around us. "Who dares to seek the heart of magic?" We spun, wands at the ready, but saw no one. "We've come to understand the equalizer stone," I called out. "To set things right." A chilling laugh answered. "Set things right. Oh, Harry Potter." Always the hero, but tell me, what gives you the right to decide what's right for the magical world? With a start, I recognized the voice. Daphne Greengrass? A figure materialized from the mist. Daphne, looking older and harder than I remembered from our Hogwarts days, stood before us. In her hand, she held a glowing amulet, another equalizer stone. Surprised, she smirked. Did you think Not was working alone? Why? Hermione demanded. Why would you want to strip magic from the world? Daphne's eyes flashed. Strip magic? Is that what you think we're doing? We're liberating it. For centuries, a select few have hoarded the power of magic, deciding who's worthy and who isn't. The equalizer stone doesn't destroy magic, it redistributes it. But people are losing their abilities, Ron protested. Only because they've forgotten the true nature of magic, Daphne countered. Those who cling to their wands, their incantations, they're the ones struggling. But there are others, muggles and wizards alike, who are discovering powers they never knew they had. I thought of the vampire in Nocturne Alley, its impossible speed and agility. You're changing the very fabric of our world, I realized aloud. Daphne nodded. The old ways are dying, Harry. The statute of secrecy, the division between magical and non-magical, it's all crumbling, and from its ashes, a new world will rise. One where everyone has the potential for magic. And who gets to decide how this new world works? I challenged. You? A cold smile played on Daphne's lips. Why don't you see for yourself? She raised the equalizer stone, and the world around us shimmered. Suddenly, we were no longer on the misty island, but in the middle of London. Except, it wasn't the London I knew. People flew through the air without brooms, buildings shifted and moved of their own accord. In the distance, I saw what looked like a dragon soaring between skyscrapers. This is what the world could be, Daphne's voice echoed. Magic, free and wild, available to all. It's chaos, Hermione whispered, her eyes wide. It's freedom, Daphne countered. The vision faded, and we were back on the island. Daphne stood before us, the equalizer stone pulsing with power. Join us, Harry, she urged. Help us usher in this new age. You've always fought for what's right. This is your chance to truly change the world. For a moment I hesitated. The vision of that magical London, as chaotic as it was, held an undeniable allure, a world without the divisions and prejudices that had caused so much pain. Harry, no, Ron said firmly, gripping my shoulder. This isn't the way. I looked at my friends, then back at Daphne. You're right about one thing, I said slowly. The old ways aren't working, but unleashing magic without control, without understanding, that's not the answer. Daphne's face hardened. Then you leave me no choice. She raised the stone, and a wave of energy pulsed outward. I felt it wash over me, trying to strip away my belief, my connection to magic. But this time, I was ready. Remembering Ollivander's words, I focused on the magic within me. Not in my wand, not in any spell, but in my very being. I felt it surge, pushing back against the stone's power. Expelliarmus! I shouted, channeling every ounce of will into the spell. A jet of red light erupted from my hand, not my wand, and struck Daphne. The equalizer stone flew from her grasp, arcing through the air. Time seemed to slow as the stone fell. I dove for it, my fingers closing around its smooth surface just before it hit the ground. As soon as I touched it, visions flooded my mind. The creation of the stone, the ancient magics it contained, the true extent of its power. I saw the potential for a world remade, but also the dangers of such unchecked power. I stood, the stone pulsing in my hand, and faced Daphne. This ends now, I said, my voice resonating with a power I'd never felt before. But as I prepared to destroy the stone, a nagging doubt crept in. Was I making the right choice? Or was I once again deciding the fate of the magical world based on my own limited understanding? The stone grew warm in my hand, as if sensing my indecision. And in that moment, I realized that the true test, the true heart of magic, was yet to come. The Wizengamot chamber was packed, the air thick with tension, as I stood before the assembled witches and wizards. I could feel their eyes on me, some hopeful, others skeptical, as I prepared to present my findings about the equalizer stone. Members of the Wizengamot, I began, my voice echoing in the cavernous room. I stand before you today with information that could change the course of our world. As I spoke about the equalizer stone and its powers, I could see the reactions rippling through the crowd. Some leaned forward, intrigued, while others shook their heads in disbelief. Are you saying, Mr. Potter, interrupted Elphias Doge, his voice quavering, that this stone is responsible for turning our people into muggles? I nodded grimly. Yes, but it's more complicated than that. The stone doesn't just remove magic, it redistributes it. It's trying to create a balance. Balance! A shout came from the back of the chamber. What about the balance of our society, our traditions? Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. I felt my frustration rising. Our society is already out of balance, I argued. We've separated ourselves from the Muggle world, hoarded magic for ourselves. Maybe it's time we... Enough! Draco Malfoy's voice cut through the chamber. He stood, his face flushed with anger. Potter, you've always been a Muggle lover, but this is too far. Are you suggesting we simply accept this plague? I met his gaze, feeling the old rivalry flaring up. What I'm suggesting, Malfoy, is that we consider all our options, including using the stone to protect those deemed worthy. The chamber erupted into chaos. Shouts of approval mingled with cries of outrage. In the midst of it all, I caught Hermione's eye. She gave me a subtle nod, understanding my strategy. Sometimes you had to let people argue themselves out. As I left the Wizengamot, my head pounding from the heated debate, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the brink of a precipice. The wizarding world was fracturing, and I wasn't sure if I could hold it together. My next stop was St. Mungo's. The hospital corridors were crowded with affected wizards and their families, the air thick with desperation and fear. Mr. Potter! A small voice caught my attention. A young girl, no more than 7 or 8, tugged at my robes. Is it true? Can you still see Hogwarts even if you're a Muggle now? I knelt down to her level, my heart breaking at the hope in her eyes. Yes, it's true. Hogwarts is still there for everyone who knows about it. Her face lit up with joy, and for a moment I saw a glimmer of the wonder I'd felt when I first learned about the magical world. It was a stark reminder of what was at stake. As I continued through the hospital, I overheard snatches of conversation that painted a grim picture of our divided world. Can't even make a cup of tea without a wand. My own children can do magic, but I can't. What if it spreads to the Muggles? What then? The weight of their fears and hopes pressed down on me. I had to find a solution, and fast. Later that evening, I organised a secret meeting with a group of Muggle-born wizards in a safe house in London. As we gathered around a worn kitchen table, I could see the mix of determination and uncertainty on their faces. Thank you all for coming, I began. I need your help. You've all lived in both the magical and Muggle worlds. I think that perspective might be key to solving this crisis. Hermione, sitting beside me, nodded encouragingly. Dean Thomas leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. It's not just about the magic, Harry, he said slowly. It's about identity. When I found out I was a wizard, it explained so much about who I was. Losing that, it's like losing a part of yourself. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Justin Finch Fletchley spoke up next. But we're more than just our magic, aren't we? I mean, look at my parents. They're Muggles, but they're brilliant in their own ways. The conversation flowed, ideas and perspectives I'd never considered before coming to light. As the night wore on, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to bridge these two worlds. But that hope was short-lived. The next day, as I walked through Diagon Alley, I found myself in the middle of a tense standoff. A group of unaffected wizards, led by some of Malfoy's old cronies, had cornered a family of new Muggles outside Flourish and Blotts. "You don't belong here anymore," one wizard shouted, his wand raised threateningly. "Go back to the Muggle world where you belong." I pushed my way through the gathering crowd, my own wand at the ready. "That's enough," I shouted, placing myself between the two groups. "They have every right to be here." Crabbe, looking older but no less brutish, sneered at me. "Always defending the weak, eh, Potter? What happens when there's no one left to defend you?" I felt my magic surge, responding to my anger. "Is that a threat, Crabbe?" For a tense moment, I thought spells would start flying, but then, to my surprise, a voice called out from the crowd. "He's right, you know." An elderly witch stepped forward, her gnarled hand gripping a walking stick. "I lost my magic 2 days ago, but I've lived in this world for 87 years. It's still my home." Her words seemed to deflate some of the tension. Slowly, the crowd began to disperse, though I could still feel the undercurrent of fear and resentment. As I helped the shaken family find their way, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. The divide was growing wider by the day. That night, as I sat in my study poring over ancient texts, the fireplace suddenly flared green. I jumped to my feet, wand raised, only to see Luna Lovegood's serene face floating in the flames. "Hello, Harry," she said, as calmly as if she were stopping by for tea. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Luna, what's going on? Is everything all right?" She smiled dreamily. "Oh, yes. Well, as all right as things can be when the world is changing. I had a vision, you see, about the future." I leaned closer, intrigued despite my exhaustion. "What kind of vision?" "I saw a world where magic and technology coexisted, where wizards and muggles worked together, sharing knowledge and abilities. It was beautiful, Harry." As Luna described her vision, I felt something stir within me, a new possibility, a potential path forward that I hadn't considered before. "Luna," I said slowly, "I think you might have just given me an idea." As the fire faded and Luna's face disappeared, I sat back, my mind racing. A united, magical and muggle world. It seemed impossible, and yet I thought of the muggle-born wizards, of Arthur Weasley's fascination with muggle technology, of the resilience I'd seen in those who'd lost their magic. Maybe the answer wasn't in clinging to the old ways or fully embracing the new, but in finding a balance between the two. It would be a monumental task, fraught with challenges and resistance. But as I looked at the equalizer stone, glowing softly on my desk, I realized that we might have been given not just a crisis, but an opportunity. The world was divided, yes, but perhaps, just perhaps, we could use this division to build something stronger, more inclusive, and more magical than ever before. As I finally went to bed, my dreams were filled with visions of a new world, a world where the barriers between magical and non-magical were blurred, where everyone had the chance to experience the wonder I'd felt when I first learned I was a wizard. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, nothing worth doing ever was. I stood before the blank wall on the 7th floor of Hogwarts, my heart pounding. "I need to understand the true nature of magic," I whispered, pacing back and forth 3 times. The familiar door of the room of requirement materialized, and I took a deep breath before pushing it open. Inside, I found not a room, but a vast, ever-shifting landscape. One moment I was standing in a sunlit meadow, the next in a dark forest, then atop a craggy mountain. Each environment pulsed with its own unique, magical energy. "What is this?" I wondered aloud. A familiar voice answered, "It is magic in its purest form, Harry." I spun around to see Dumbledore standing beside me, or at least a manifestation of him created by the room. "Professor," I said, "I don't understand. How can magic be a place?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "Ah, but is it a place, Harry? Or is it a feeling, a connection? What do you see when you look around?" I gazed at the shifting landscape, trying to make sense of it all. "I see life, energy, possibility." "Exactly," Dumbledore nodded. "Magic is not just spells and wands, Harry. It's the very essence of possibility, of change, of life itself." As he spoke, the scene changed again. We were now in a bustling Muggle city, surrounded by towering skyscrapers and honking cars. "But what about here?" I asked. "There's no magic in the Muggle world, is there?" Dumbledore chuckled. "Isn't there? Look closer, Harry." I focused, and suddenly I could see it. Threads of energy connecting everything and everyone. The determination of a businessman late for a meeting, the joy of a child playing in a park, the love between an elderly couple walking hand in hand. It was different from the magic I knew, but it was undeniably powerful. "It's everywhere," I breathed. "Now you're beginning to understand," Dumbledore said. "The equalizer stone hasn't destroyed magic, Harry. It's simply redistributed it." Before I could ask what he meant, the room shifted again. This time, I found myself face to face with the portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black. "Potter," he sneered. "Come to solve all our problems, have you?" I felt my temper flare. "I'm trying to understand what's happening so I can help everyone, not just purebloods." Phineas scoffed. "Help everyone? You'll destroy our way of life. Magic is what separates us from the Muggles. Without it, what are we?" "We're people," I shot back. "Just like everyone else. Maybe that's not such a bad thing." "Not such a bad," Phineas sputtered. "Have you lost your mind, boy? Our traditions, our culture, everything that makes us who we are. You'd throw it all away." I paused, considering his words. "No," I said slowly. "Not throw it away. But maybe it's time for it to evolve." Phineas opened his mouth to argue further, but the room shifted once more. I was back in the burrow, watching Arthur Weasley tinker with a Muggle television set. Fascinating, isn't it? Arthur said, not looking up from his work. The things Muggles come up with to cope without magic. In some ways, it's even more impressive than what we do. I nodded, an idea forming in my mind. Mr. Weasley, what if we could combine Muggle technology with magic, not to replace one with the other, but to create something new? Arthur's eyes lit up. Now that would be something, wouldn't it? The best of both worlds. As I pondered this possibility, a chill ran down my spine. The room around me began to fade, growing dim and colorless. I felt a familiar warmth leaving my body. My magic was draining away. Panic gripped me. "No," I whispered. "Not now. Please, not now." I raised my wand, desperately trying to cast a spell. Any spell. "Lumos," I croaked. Nothing happened. The fear and loss I felt in that moment were overwhelming. Is this what Ron had experienced? What countless others were going through? I fell to my knees, my wand clattering uselessly to the floor. "Harry," a soft voice called. I looked up to see Ginny standing before me, her eyes full of compassion. "It's okay. You're more than your magic. You always have been." I reached for her hand, but she disappeared like smoke. The room was changing again, faster now. Flashes of my life without magic played before my eyes, struggling with simple tasks, feeling lost and powerless, watching my friends move on without me. But then I saw other things too, moments of joy, of love, of triumph that had nothing to do with magic. Holding my children for the first time, laughing with Ron and Hermione, the simple pleasure of a Quidditch game with the Weasleys. As quickly as it had left, my magic returned in a rush. I gasped, feeling the warmth spread through my body once more. But something had changed. I understood now, in a way I never had before, that magic wasn't what defined me. It was a part of me, yes, but not the most important part. The room settled into its final form, a perfect replica of the Gryffindor common room. As I sank into a familiar armchair by the fire, I heard Dumbledore's voice one last time. "You've learned the most important lesson, Harry. Magic is not about power or superiority. It's about connection, to each other, to the world around us, to the very essence of life itself." I nodded, feeling a new sense of purpose. We've been looking at this all wrong, I realized. The Equalizer Stone isn't a curse, it's an opportunity. As I left the room of requirement, my mind was racing with possibilities. We didn't need to reverse what the stone had done. We needed to embrace it, to use it as a catalyst for change. But I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Not everyone would understand or accept this new perspective. There would be resistance, fear, maybe even violence. As I made my way back to the Ministry, I steeled myself for the challenges to come. The true nature of magic was far more complex and beautiful than I'd ever imagined. Now I just had to convince the rest of the wizarding world. I stood before the gathered crowd, my heart pounding. Wizards affected by the Equalizer Stone sat on one side of the room, their faces a mix of hope and skepticism. On the other side, Muggles who were aware of the magical world watched with wide-eyed curiosity. This meeting was unprecedented, risky, and absolutely necessary. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. "We're here today to bridge a gap that has existed for centuries, to find common ground in a world that's changing faster than we can comprehend." A wizard in the front row scoffed. "Common ground? They've stolen our magic." "We didn't steal anything," a Muggle woman retorted. "We're victims in this too." I raised my hands, calling for calm. This is exactly why we need this dialogue. The Equalizer Stone has affected all of us, magical and non-magical alike. We need to work together to find a solution. As the meeting progressed, tensions ebbed and flowed. There were moments of understanding, a former Quidditch player and a Muggle athlete bonding over the thrill of sport, and flashes of anger, a pureblood wizard storming out after a heated exchange about magical superiority. Hermione, ever the diplomat, mediated a particularly tense discussion. "Think about it," she urged. "Wizards have always used Muggle inventions and adapted them. Electricity, the radio, even the Hogwarts Express. We're not so different." Slowly, cautiously, bridges began to form. As the meeting concluded, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next day I stood before the Wizengamot, my palms sweating beneath my robes. The chamber was packed, with every member in attendance and spectators crammed into every available space. Members of the Wizengamot, I began, my voice magically amplified. I stand before you today with a proposal that may seem radical, even dangerous. But in these unprecedented times, we must be willing to consider all options. I waved my wand, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a curious blend of magical and muggle technology, a wand with circuitry running through it, a broomstick with small jet engines, a cauldron with digital temperature controls. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Elphias Doge leaned forward, his eyes wide. Mr. Potter, what exactly are we looking at? The future, I replied simply. A way for those affected by the Equalizer Stone to reconnect with their magic, and for muggles to interact with our world in ways never before possible. The chamber erupted into chaos. Shouts of impossible and blasphemy mingled with excited whispers and curious questions. Augusta Longbottom's voice cut through the din. And how do you propose to create these abominations? I took a deep breath. By working together, wizards, muggles, and those in between. We have an opportunity here to not just solve our current crisis, but to evolve our society into something stronger, more inclusive. As I continued my presentation, I could see the Wizengamot members' reactions shifting. Some remained steadfastly opposed, their faces set in stony disapproval. Others leaned forward, intrigued by the possibilities. And a few, a precious few, nodded in agreement. As I concluded, Minister Shacklebolt stood. This is a lot to consider, Mr. Potter. We'll need time to deliberate. I nodded, understanding the magnitude of what I was proposing. As I left the chamber, I was cornered by Rita Skeeter, her quick quotes quill already scribbling furiously. Harry, darling, she purred. Care to comment on the rumors that you're trying to dismantle the entire wizarding world? Some are calling you a traitor to magic itself. I gritted my teeth, forcing a polite smile. No comment, Rita. Excuse me. As I pushed past her, I caught sight of a commotion near the ministry atrium. My blood ran cold as I recognized the voices. It was the group of extremists we'd been tracking, the ones who wanted to use the Equalizer Stone to turn all muggles into wizards. I rushed towards the sound, wand at the ready. As I rounded the corner, I saw them, a group of hooded figures, led by a wizard I recognized as Rodolphus Lestrange, Bellatrix's widower. Today we take back what's ours, Lestrange shouted, raising a glowing amulet, another Equalizer Stone. We'll flood the world with magic and crush the muggle filth beneath our feet. Expelliarmus! I shouted, but Lestrange was too quick. He deflected my spell and turned, his eyes gleaming with madness. Potter, he spat. Come to stop progress, have you? You're too late. The new world is already dawning. Spells began flying as ministry workers and civilians alike joined the fray. I ducked and weaved, acutely aware that my own magic was still unreliable. A stunning spell grazed my shoulder, sending me spinning. As I regained my footing, I saw something that made my heart soar. A group of muggles, led by Dudley Dursley of all people, had joined the fight. They wielded fire extinguishers and improvised weapons, working alongside wizards to push back the extremists. Just like old times, eh, Harry? Dudley grinned, swinging a broken chair leg at a nearby attacker. I couldn't help but laugh, even as I deflected another curse. Better than old times, Big D, much better. The battle raged on, magic and muggle ingenuity blending in ways I'd never imagined. A young witch used her wand to guide a muggle's thrown object with pinpoint accuracy. A wizard whose magic had been affected used a muggle taser to incapacitate an attacker. As the tide began to turn, Lestrange realized he was outnumbered. With a snarl of fury, he raised the Equalizer Stone. This isn't over, Potter. The world will be remade, whether you like it or not. With a crack, he disapparated, taking the stone with him. The remaining extremists, seeing their leader flee, quickly followed suit. As the dust settled, I looked around the atrium. Wizards and muggles alike were helping each other up, tending to wounds and sharing relieved smiles. In that moment, I saw a glimpse of the future I'd been fighting for. A world united, not divided. Minister Shacklebolt approached, his robe singed, but his eyes bright. Well, Mr. Potter, I think you've made your point rather spectacularly. Perhaps it's time we seriously considered your proposal. I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and hope. Thank you, Minister. But we can't rest yet. Lestrange is still out there with an Equalizer Stone, and something tells me he's not done trying to reshape the world. As I helped clean up the aftermath of the battle, my mind raced with plans and possibilities. We'd taken a big step today, but the road ahead was still long and fraught with danger. The bridges we'd built were fragile, and the barriers of centuries of separation wouldn't fall easily. But for the first time since this crisis began, I felt truly optimistic. We'd faced impossible odds before and triumphed. This time would be no different. The wizarding world was changing, evolving, and I was determined to ensure it changed for the better. As I caught Hermione's eye across the room, she gave me a tired but determined smile. We both knew that the real work was just beginning, but together, wizards, muggles, and everyone in between, we'd find a way forward. We had to. The future of both our worlds depended on it. I stood before the Wizengamot, my heart pounding. The chamber was packed, the air thick with tension and anticipation. Every eye was on me, the boy who lived, the chosen one, now tasked with making a decision that would change the wizarding world forever. "Members of the Wizengamot," I began, my voice steady despite my inner turmoil. "I come before you today with a proposal that may seem radical, even dangerous. But in these unprecedented times, we must be willing to consider all options." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the reaction I knew was coming. I propose that we use the Equalizer Stone to give everyone, wizard and muggle alike, the choice between magic and non-magic. The chamber erupted into chaos. Shouts of outrage mingled with gasps of disbelief. I caught sight of Hermione in the crowd, her face a mix of pride and concern. "Order! Order!" Kingsley's deep voice boomed over the din, restoring a semblance of calm. "Mr. Potter," an elderly witch in the front row spoke up, her voice quavering. "Are you suggesting we simply give away our magic, the very thing that defines us?" I shook my head. "Not give it away, Madam Marchbanks. Share it. Level the playing field. For too long, we've hidden in the shadows, separated ourselves from the Muggle world. Maybe it's time we bridge that gap." "This is preposterous," Lucius Malfoy's voice cut through the murmurs. "You would destroy centuries of tradition, of pure blood heritage." I turned to face him, my eyes hard. "And what has that tradition brought us, Lucius? Wars, discrimination, a world divided." "You go too far, Potter," Draco interjected, standing beside his father. "This isn't just about purebloods, it's about the very nature of our world. You can't simply rewrite the rules of magic." "Can't I?" I challenged. "The Equalizer Stone has already done that. We're just deciding how to respond." As the debate raged on, I felt the weight of the choice bearing down on me. Was I doing the right thing, or was I about to make a catastrophic mistake? A hand on my shoulder made me turn. It was Neville, his face etched with determination. "I'm with you, Harry," he said quietly. "Whatever you decide." His support bolstered me, but I couldn't shake the doubts. I thought of my children, James, Albus, Lily, and the world they would inherit. Would they thank me for this decision, or curse my name? As the session adjourned for deliberation, I slipped out of the chamber, needing a moment to clear my head. I found myself in the ministry atrium, staring up at the restored fountain of magical brethren. "Heavy lies the crown, eh, Potter?" I turned to see Theodore Nott leaning against a pillar, a smirk playing on his lips. "Nott," I growled, my hand instinctively reaching for my wand. "You've got a lot to answer for." He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Easy there, chosen one. I'm not here to fight, just to observe." "Observe what?" I snapped. "The chaos you've caused." Nott's smirk widened. "Chaos? I prefer to think of it as evolution. You're standing on the precipice of a new world order, Potter. How does it feel?" I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "It feels like you're playing with forces you don't understand, Nott. People are suffering. People are awakening," he countered. "For the first time, they're seeing the arbitrary nature of magic. Who gets it, who doesn't? Doesn't that bother you, Potter? The unfairness of it all?" His words hit closer to home than I cared to admit. Hadn't I wondered the same thing all those years ago when I first learned I was a wizard? "That doesn't justify what you've done," I said. But I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. Nott noticed it too. His smile turned predatory. "Doesn't it? Tell me, Potter, if you had the power to remake the world, to level the playing field once and for all, wouldn't you use it?" Before I could respond, a commotion from the chamber caught our attention. The Wizengamot was reconvening. Nott straightened up, adjusting his robes. "Well, this should be interesting. Good luck in there, Potter. You're going to need it." As he sauntered away, I felt a chill run down my spine. Was I playing right into his hands? I re-entered the chamber, the weight of the world on my shoulders. Kingsley stood at the center, his face grave. "Mr. Potter," he began, "the Wizengamot has deliberated on your proposal. While there are concerns, we recognize the unprecedented nature of our situation. We are prepared to consider your plan, but we require more details. How exactly do you propose to implement this choice? I stepped forward, my mind racing. This was it, the moment that would define not just my legacy, but the future of magic itself. The process would be voluntary, I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. We would use the equalizer stone to create a ritual. Anyone, wizard or muggle, who wishes to participate would have the opportunity to either retain their magic, give it up, or, in the case of muggles, potentially gain it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I pressed on. But it's not just about magic. It's about knowledge, about breaking down the barriers between our worlds. Those who choose to remain magical would be required to live openly among muggles, sharing their abilities and knowledge. Those who choose to give up magic would retain their memories, acting as bridges between the two worlds. And the Statute of Secrecy, someone called out. I took a deep breath. It would be dissolved, completely. The chamber exploded into shouts and arguments. I stood my ground, waiting for the storm to pass. Finally, Kingsley raised his hand for silence. This is a monumental decision, Mr. Potter, one that will require careful consideration and planning. The Wizengamot will need time to discuss and vote. I nodded, understanding the gravity of what I was proposing. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Ginny in the gallery. Her eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of love, pride, and fear. In that moment, I realized the true weight of the choice before us. It wasn't just about magic. It was about the very fabric of our society, our identities, our future. As I left the ministry, my mind was a whirlwind of doubts and possibilities. Had I just saved the wizarding world, or condemned it? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Whatever the outcome, there was no going back. The choice had been made. Now, we had to live with the consequences. The air crackled with anticipation as I stood atop the astronomy tower at Hogwarts, the equalizer stone pulsing warmly in my hand. Below, a sea of faces looked up at me. Wizards, witches, and muggles alike, all waiting with bated breath for what was to come. "Are you sure about this, Harry?" Hermione asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Once we do this, there's no going back." I met her gaze, seeing my own mix of fear and determination reflected in her eyes. "We don't have a choice, Hermione. The world is tearing itself apart. This is the only way to bring balance." Ron stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. "We're with you, mate. Whatever happens." I nodded, grateful for their unwavering support. Taking a deep breath, I raised the equalizer stone high above my head. "People of the magical and non-magical worlds," I began, my voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the grounds. "For too long, we've been divided, by fear, by misunderstanding, by the very nature of magic itself. Today, we have a chance to change that." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see the doubt, the fear, but also the hope in their faces. The equalizer stone has shown us that magic isn't something that belongs to a select few. It's a force that exists in all of us, waiting to be awakened. Today, we're going to give everyone a choice. I paused, letting my words sink in. With this ritual, each of you will have the opportunity to embrace magic or to live without it. The choice will be yours, and yours alone. Suddenly, a voice cut through the crowd. "And who are you to decide this for all of us, Potter?" Draco Malfoy pushed his way to the front, his face contorted with rage. "You're meddling with forces beyond your understanding." I met his gaze steadily. "You're right, Draco. I don't fully understand these forces. None of us do, but I do know that the old way isn't working anymore. We have to evolve, or we'll destroy ourselves." "This is madness," another voice shouted. I recognized Elphias Doge, his ancient face creased with worry. "You'll be exposing our entire world to the Muggles." "Perhaps it's time we did." Kingsley Shacklebolt's deep voice resonated as he stepped forward. "The Statute of Secrecy has protected us, yes, but it has also isolated us. Maybe it's time for a change." I nodded gratefully to Kingsley before turning back to the crowd. "This isn't a decision I'm making lightly, but I believe it's the right thing to do, for all of us." With that, I closed my eyes and focused all my will on the stone. I felt its power surge through me, connecting me to every person present. In my mind's eye, I could see threads of magic stretching out, touching each individual. "Now," I said, my voice strained with effort, "make your choice." The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly, points of light began to appear throughout the crowd. Some burned bright and strong, while others flickered uncertainly. And some remained dark. I opened my eyes to a world transformed. All around me, people were gasping, laughing, crying as they discovered their newfound abilities, or came to terms with their choice to remain non-magical. Hermione was the first to speak, her voice filled with awe. "Harry, look!" I followed her gaze to see a young muggle girl, no more than 7 or 8, creating sparks with her fingertips. Her parents watched in amazement, their own hands glowing faintly with magical potential. But not everyone was celebrating. I spotted Draco, his face a mask of horror as he stared at his non-glowing hands. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be happening." I moved towards him, but Ron held me back. "Let him be, Harry. It was his choice." As the initial shock began to wear off, questions and concerns erupted from the crowd. What does this mean for Hogwarts? How will we govern ourselves now? What about the magical creatures? I raised my hands, calling for calm. "I know you all have questions, believe me, I do too. We're entering uncharted territory here, but I promise you, we'll figure it out together." Kingsley stepped up beside me. "Mr. Potter is right. This is a new dawn for all of us. It won't be easy, but I believe it will be worth it. We'll be forming a transitional council with representatives from both the magical and non-magical communities to help guide us through this change." As Kingsley continued to address the crowd, I felt a tug on my robes. I looked down to see my son, Albus, his green eyes wide with uncertainty. "Dad," he said softly, I chose not to have magic." My heart clenched, but I knelt down to his level, placing my hands on his shoulders. "That's okay, Al. Magic doesn't define who you are. You're my son, and I love you, no matter what." He threw his arms around me, and I held him tight, feeling a mix of pride and sadness wash over me. As the day wore on, the reality of our new world began to set in. There were moments of joy, like seeing Arthur Weasley excitedly explaining electricity to a group of former purebloods, and moments of tension as old prejudices clashed with new realities. But through it all, there was a sense of hope, of possibility, that I hadn't felt in years. As the sun began to set, I found myself back on the astronomy tower, looking out over the grounds. Hogwarts stood as it always had, a beacon of learning and unity. But now, its gates were open to all who sought knowledge, magical and non-magical alike. "Quite a view, isn't it?" a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to see the portrait of Albus Dumbledore, somehow transported to the tower. "Professor," I said, a lump forming in my throat. "Did I do the right thing?" Dumbledore's blue eyes twinkled. "My dear boy, you did a very brave thing, and I believe in time it will prove to be the right thing as well." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. There's still so much to do, so many challenges ahead. "Indeed," Dumbledore agreed, "but you won't face them alone. You never have." As if on cue, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Ron and Hermione appeared, followed by Ginny, Neville, and Luna. "There you are, mate," Ron said. "McGonagall's called a meeting. Something about revising the entire curriculum." I couldn't help but laugh. Some things, it seemed, would never change. As we made our way back down the tower, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The world had changed, yes, but the important things remained. Friendship, love, the power of choice, and magic, I realized, would always be there for those who believed in it. The Muggle metamorphosis was complete. But our story, it was just beginning.